Hello and a very good morning. It's 7 o'clock. This is Mornings with me, Anna Jones. Here's how things are looking. The first pin falls against Gianni Infantino. The Welsh FA says it won't back him to be re-elected as FIFA president. Donald Trump says negotiations to end the war with Iran will begin this afternoon after calling off a wave of weekend strikes. The longest ballot paper in British political history. We preview the upcoming Clacton by-election following the resignation of Nigel Farage. Also today, we're going to be seeing what's making the headlines in today's papers with the journalist and author Janelle Aldred. Plus, the dramatic smash and grab as thieves make off with a cash machine after tying it to their car. Hello, very good morning. Thanks for joining us here today. Our top story, Sky News can reveal that Wales has become the first football association to officially withdraw support for Gianni Infantino to be re-elected as president of FIFA. This follows the loss of confidence in Infantino's leadership after the botched attempt to sell off a stake in the World Cup. Our sports correspondent, Rob Harris, has the story.
Well, this crisis facing Gianni Infantino is developing at all hours of the day and night, and I've just heard from the Football Association of Wales exclusively that they have written to FIFA to tell them they have withdrawn their support for Gianni Infantino's re-election next year. This is, we expect, the start of a cascade of letters from across Europe to pile pressure on Infantino to leave office after his botched attempts to sell off stakes in the World Cup to private investors. This crisis is escalating now on Infantino. We've had the loss of confidence in his leadership from UEFA on Saturday. Now the start of a new week is beginning with an attempt to force action from him, because we've still not heard from Gianni Infantino since the European football associations withdrew their support on Saturday. And we also heard from the North American Confederation as well that they didn't back him too at the moment in terms of his leadership. Well, this is what I've just heard exclusively from the Football Association of Wales. This is their statement to Sky News. The Football Association of Wales hereby confirms its withdrawal of support for the candidature of Mr. Gianni Infantino for re-election as FIFA president for the 2027-2031 term. The recent failures in good governance, processes, leadership values, stakeholder management, communications, and sound judgment have led us to a position where Mr. Infantino has lost the confidence of the FAW to remain at the helm of world football. Failing to put the best interests of football first is a failure we cannot accept. That is damning. Wales does have a significant role in world football. In February, they were hosting Gianni Infantino for a major meeting. The laws of football are set by the body called the International Football Association Board. It's made up of 8 votes, half are held by FIFA, the other 4 by the home UK associations, including Wales. So that gives Wales a lot of clout in the world. And this is an attempt to start the momentum from within Europe to see that Infantino doesn't stand for re-election, but there's a desire to see him lose office sooner. On Sunday, we discovered that UEFA had threatened Gianni Infantino with legal action over this attempt to sell off shares in the World Cup. They've told him to retain all documentation, and this really is a significant and growing rebellion facing Gianni Infantino, who's been in power for 10 years, but now is on the brink and could well be forced out of office in disgrace. We've still not heard from him since he revealed exclusively to Sky News in the early hours of Saturday morning that he was abandoning the attempts to sell off those stakes by launching a new commercial venture for the World Cup that he valued at $20 billion, trying to raise $4.2 billion. He was saying it's about making more money for football associations around the world. He's been told by many, including his senior advisor, Carlos Cordero, who quit last week, it's a bad deal for football. And the concern is that cronyism has led to this, his links to Donald Trump and an attempt to make money out of it himself. But this, we now have exclusively that Wales has become the first football association worldwide to withdraw its support for Gianni Infantino's re-election bid next year in an attempt to pile on the pressure to see him leave office.
And we're going to get lots more reaction to Rob's story at 1:30. Jackie's going to be here with me to talk through all the fallout, what the future might be for Gianni Infantino, and she'll have all the rest of the top stories as well Of course. Meanwhile, to the Iran war, and Donald Trump says that negotiations with Iran will begin this afternoon after calling off an intense wave of strikes planned for the weekend. Travelling on Air Force One, the president said he decided to cancel the large-scale attack after hearing from Gulf leaders.
Well, now what we're doing is we're talking to them in the form of a negotiation. It begins tomorrow afternoon, and we'll see if it's true. I'd love to do that, save a lot of lives. Save a lot of unnecessary power, to be honest with you. It would take many, many years to ever build it back. If it could, I don't think it would be even buildable back. So we had an attack that would be the biggest attack since World War II, and it would have been disastrous for them. And they didn't want us to do it. And frankly, Saudi Arabia didn't want it either. They thought that a deal is imminent.
And we'll, of course, keep you up to date with any developments as far as those talks are concerned throughout the day. Now, a British pilot is recovering after surviving a mid-air helicopter collision while battling wildfires in Greece. It happened in the central Attica region of the country. 2 others died after the helicopters crashed into each other, a Greek national and Danish pilot, while the UK citizen and Greek national were rescued alive. Barnaby Papadopoulos reports.
This is the moment 2 firefighting helicopters collided in mid-air. The crew of one helicopter, a Greek national and a British citizen, were both found safe and well by search and rescue teams. The crew members on board the other, one Greek, one Danish, both died in the crash. Over 500 firefighters are battling these flames northwest of Athens. At least 100 homes have already been destroyed and over 1,000 people have been evacuated. Hours before Sunday's fatal collision, the country's Prime Minister warned that firefighting aircraft might struggle to fly due to high winds. Kyriakos Mitsotakis warned that his country faced extremely difficult days ahead, high winds both fanning the flames and hampering efforts to bring them under control. Already, wildfires in Greece have claimed the lives of 3 firefighters in the Peloponnese and on the islands of Crete. The end of July saw huge wildfires in areas of France and Spain. These are now under control, but with such high temperatures, the risk of further fires can't be ruled out. For now, though, it appears that as the danger eases slightly in the west of Europe, it is increasing in its east. For Greece, tragedy in the air as well as on the ground, as the wildfires continue to burn on. Barnaby Papadopoulos, Sky News.
The Prime Minister insists his government will be relentless in tackling small boat crossings. Andy Burnham made the pledge while meeting emergency workers at Dover. Our political correspondent Lucy McDade reports.
This image could come back to haunt Andy Burnham or hail him the leader who succeeded where others didn't. Beside him, a boat that carried 96 migrants across the Channel in May, among those on board men, women and young children. They're the scenes that have become all too familiar, ones that successive governments still haven't managed to stop.
We have to deal with the issue rather than play politics with the issue. Just deal with it, head on, grip it, and then make the changes that will bring that reassurance to the public. It's about changing the whole approach, and slowly but surely we are putting in place those building blocks of a very different approach to this issue. It's working, but there's more to be done.
But as Andy Burnham says, these pictures don't actually tell the full story. Small boat crossings initially went up after Keir Starmer came to power, but the official data shows numbers have since fallen. At the start of this year, that dipped significantly and continued to gradually decline. But that doesn't mean the boats have stopped. And since Andy Burnham took over, in just 2 weeks, we've seen more than 2,000 people arrive on UK shores. The weather is, of course, a factor, but the government is pointing to policy. So, for example, a deal with France was renewed fairly recently at a cost of £662 million. What's it paying for? Well, more police officers on French beaches, more surveillance technology, so like drones along the coastline, to intercept criminal gangs. In Dover, these officers try and track down the people smugglers behind the channel crossings. They've more than doubled in number since the start of 2025. But while the government believes these measures are working, others say they're not going far enough.
Since this Prime Minister came to office, he's not even been in post 2 weeks. More than 2,000 people have arrived and several people have been found dead in the Channel. This is a huge problem. It requires a real sizable solution. The solution's there. The National Crime Agency have told us, the people at home know, people who come into this country must be detained and must be deported.
Scenes like this have heightened tensions in recent days. Around 60,000 migrants have crossed from Morocco to the Spanish territory of Ceuta in northern Africa. Unprecedented pictures, prompting critics to blame Spain for being too liberal on immigration. So while back home the new Prime Minister might be somewhat satisfied with government progress, he also knows this is the issue that has plagued his predecessors. Complacency could not only cost him his job, but Labour the next election. Lucy McDade, Sky News, in Dover.
Well, you heard there from Lucy about the crisis in the Spanish enclave of Ceuta, where tens of thousands of migrants crossed over from Morocco. Well, the European Union is going to hold emergency talks on the issue tomorrow after Italy reinstated border checks on arrivals from Spain. And it's also caused anger on the Spanish mainland as well. Around 1,500 protesters took to the streets of Madrid to demand that the Spanish government take action. Around 60,000 people crossed into Ceuta from Morocco, but most have now returned voluntarily, although at least 86 people died in the chaos. So let's bring in our political correspondent, Alex Rogers, who's here with me. And extraordinary pictures from Ceuta over the end of last week and over the weekend, Alex. But to what extent has that concentrated minds here politically on illegal migration?
Well, it's just reignited the very fierce and heated debate around migration that we've got here. And we saw Andy Burnham in Dover on Sunday sort of watching the activities of law enforcement. And that's because since he became Prime Minister, 2,000 people have arrived here in small boats. So this issue just...
And that's just 2 weeks, isn't it?
Exactly. In just 2 weeks, 2,000 people have arrived here on a small boat. Now, the government will say that small boat crossings are significantly down this year than they were last year, 43% down on the same period. And they will say that their work with the French, increased patrols, specialist units to sort of intercept boats, they would say that that's working. But of course, the governments don't really get credit for when, they only get credit if people don't see this happening, but it is still continuing to happen. And Reform and the Tories continuing to put pressure on Andy Burnham for this. They say he hasn't addressed it enough since he's been Prime Minister, but he obviously is now and has been at the weekend.
Well, that's right. And Reform as well are putting out a policy of their own, a new policy, haven't they? What are they saying?
Well, they're saying that they want the Navy to get involved and return migrants back to France. Now, Labour say this is a non-starter, effectively. They're saying, there is no agreement with France and that this could antagonise France. If we're encroaching in on their waters to try and take migrants back to France, that would risk inflaming tensions and undermine the cooperation that we've seen on French beaches that have reduced the number of crossings. So they say it's a complete non-starter.
Interesting stuff, and we're going to be hearing from the government, from Reform and from the Tories later on in the programme. So interesting to see what they have to say about this issue. Alex, thanks very much indeed. Now, let's stick with politics, because voters in Clacton are being asked to pick an MP for the 6th time in 12 years next week after Nigel Farage resigned in early July in the midst of a parliamentary investigation. Well, despite Reform being the only major party to put a candidate forward for the by-election, there's a record 34 names on the ballot. Our political correspondent, Ali Fortescue, takes a look at what's to come.
So the media circus is once again rolling into Clacton. Are we just looking at more political stunts?
You would rather a bin representing you in Parliament than Nigel Farage?
Yeah. Or is there something more interesting going on here? A quick reminder of why this by-election is happening in the first place.
No, I've decided that the people of Clacton should be the judges of my actions. This will be a people versus the establishment by-election.
There are a record 34 candidates standing in this by-election, but apart from Reform UK, the other main parties, so the Conservatives, Labour, the Lib Dem, the Greens, are not standing until after that parliamentary probe into the £5 million gift received by Nigel Farage has completed. He, of course, says he's done nothing wrong, and the reason that he's willing to gamble in Clacton is because he knows the level of support he has, which, to be fair, is hard to miss.
Do you mind me asking who you're going to vote for?
Oh, Reform. I'll give you a guess.
Nigel Farage?
There you go.
Farage.
Why?
I like him, and I think he's very upfront.
Would you vote for Farage, Nigel Farage?
Yes, absolutely.
Yes. Did you vote for him last time?
No.
But interestingly, the other name that has come up is this one.
I actually will be voting for Count Binface.
May the best life form win and make your votes count!
Some of his manifesto is a bit of a jibe and a bit of a joke. I think, you know, someone new, I think it'd be something fresh.
He's the only alternative to Nigel Farage, and I'd like to see Nigel Farage lose his seat.
The widespread expectation is that Nigel Farage will win here, but people aren't just voting for what they want, they are voting for what they don't want. We have seen so much tactical voting recently in Gorton and Denton, in Makerfield. It is particularly striking here that there is at least a level of organisation round Count Binface. People are willing to vote for a novelty candidate to try to stop Nigel Farage.
There won't be a get-out-the-vote operation in any formal sense from the other parties. Supporters of those parties who don't fancy going and tactically voting for Count Binface really don't have, or another candidate, really don't have much of a reason to head out to the polls, probably. So I do think we probably should expect turnout to be depressed.
You don't have to look far to see that we are in Reform UK territory here. This is a constituency that is predominantly older, white, Brexit voting. Remember, it was the first UKIP seat in the country. Reform UK sources tell me that they hope they can get 80% of the vote share. Turnout will probably be low. They think this gamble is going to pay off. And we'll soon find out if Nigel Farage has overplayed his hand.
And you can watch Ali's full report by scanning the QR code that you can see on your screen right now. So it's time now to speak to the government. I'm joined this morning by the Energy Secretary, Miatta van Buller. Very good morning to you. Thanks so much for coming in. And I want to get onto the issue of energy in a moment. But first, I wanted to get your reaction to events over the weekend and at the end of last week in Ceuta, the Spanish enclave that saw 60,000 migrants cross from Morocco into. Are there lessons to be learned about what happened there?
Well, look, I think anyone that saw those scenes will be incredibly worried about them. I think, we've been in very close contact with the Spanish. As I understand it, 98% of the people that crossed the borders have now been returned. But there is something about having control of our borders and making sure they can't be breached. I think here we've got, Home Secretary that is getting to grip with this issue, and we've just got to be relentless, as the Prime Minister said. Well,
yes, he used that word relentless, didn't he, in curbing the number of small boat crossings. But what does that mean? I mean, is he going to continue with Starmer's approach, or has he got new plans? What's happening? Well, look, so the thing I would say is that we have seen small boat crossings decline by 50% over the course of last year. I think the crossings this July were the lowest we've had for 6 years. And we need to continue that. And the approach that we are taking is threefold. It is partly about enforcement. So we've seen a doubling of enforcement officers to make sure that people aren't getting on those boats to begin with. And if they are and they need to be returned, they're returned. But secondly, it is about making sure that we are getting to grips with the criminal gangs that are at the heart of this. We've seen an increase of arrests, about 74%. And then the third plank is making sure that there are safe and legal routes. We think that approach is working, 50% down. Everyone wants to see an end to small boats crossing. It is a nightmare for the people who are on those boats, putting their lives at risk. It is a nightmare for us trying to control our borders, and we've got to get to grips. So you're basically saying no change or continuation on of the existing policies? Well, because it is working, 50% down on last year. Yeah, but you will say that statistic about the number compared to last year. Absolutely, but just to point out that since Andy Burnham's been Prime Minister just a fortnight ago, 2,000 illegal migrants have crossed in small boats across the English Channel. I mean, it's still a huge issue, isn't it?
It is, but since we have taken over the course of the last 2 years, it's going down. And we've got a three-pronged approach. I come back to it. It's about enforcement. It's about crushing the criminal gangs so that ultimately they aren't exploiting people who are vulnerable.
Yeah, we've been through
it is about safe and legal routes. We think that approach is delivering. We will continue being completely vigilant on it, because ultimately no one wants to see people crossing the channels, putting their lives at risk.
Let me just put to you Reform's idea, though. They think that it's more of a crisis than that, and more action is needed. They are suggesting, and to quote them, the largest military operation in the English Channel since World War II to stop small boat arrivals. They say that you and the Tories have just responded to the issue so far with a free ferry service and free hotels.
Well, listen, what I would say is, their proposal, which I believe was tried when Robert Jenrick, who used to be a Tory, was in the Home Office in charge of immigration, it didn't work. I don't believe it will work now. Candidly, we're not going to take advice from Reform about how we get to grips with this, because the set of people they've got in charge in Reform were the set of people who were in the government at the time when we saw this crisis. We think we do have an approach that's working. We just have to be... we've got to be focused, we've got to be relentless. It's down by 50%. There is more that we need to do. We recognise that, but the approach is working.
OK, let's move on to the issue of energy, because there's been a lot of speculation about what Andy Burnham will do when it comes to North Sea oil and gas drilling. He said he's going to be pragmatic about it. You're the Energy Secretary. What does that mean? What does pragmatic mean? Does it mean he's minded to expand drilling in the North Sea?
Well, listen, we have been really clear that oil and gas are part of our energy mix as we do this transition. This is not just the government's position, but the Committee for Climate Change has also been clear that as we do the transition, oil and gas will be part of the mix. And so that has always been the position. It continues to be the position. There are a set of decisions that need to be made about existing licences, which, if you'll forgive me, I'm not going to go into because they're quasi-judicial. I need to make that decision based on the evidence that's available for me. But the thing I am really clear about, and I was in Aberdeen my first week in the job to talk to the workers, to talk to the businesses there, and we do have a situation where jobs are being lost. This has happened for the last decade. We've got a community that used to be at the very heart of our energy sector that feels that they're being hollowed out. That can't be allowed to happen. That is not something we will let happen under our watch and a Labour government. So we need a plan for Aberdeen. We need to make sure that we are investing to create the jobs that will sustain that community and ensure that they are a thriving part of our energy sector going forward.
I mean, I think that the licences you're referring to are the Jackdaw gas field in the North Sea and the Rosebank oil field west of Shetland. Already in the planning system, of course, you could say that they don't necessarily constitute being new licences, which you've said in the manifesto that you wouldn't allow. So would you be comfortable, in theory, with them being approved?
Well, again, I know why you're trying to draw me, but if you'll forgive me...
I just want to get your personal view.
Look, because it's not, because I'm the decision maker. And if it looks like I am making the decision based on anything other than the evidence that's presented to me, that prejudices that decision, so I can't go into it. But look, what I would say is that we recognise that there are issues in the North Sea around jobs. That's why we're trying to invest record amounts there. So whether that is existing jobs that exist, that we've got to do our bit of trying to make sure we're preserving them, or the billions that we're hoping to put into clean energy, whether that is carbon capture and storage, whether that is offshore floating wind, we are determined to make sure that Aberdeen continues to be a core part of our energy sector going forward.
You don't want to go into whether or not you're minded to...
Because I can't.
OK.
Because otherwise I'm prejudicing a decision that needs to be made.
If they were approved by you and through the process... would you risk losing the support of many of your own MPs? A number of them have come out voicing concerns, not only what it would mean for your environmental credentials as a party, but also suggesting that many of their constituents are seeing soaring temperatures, worst drought since 1976, and are raising concerns themselves. Would you have a revolt on your hands?
Well, so two things. Any decision that is made, there is, if you like, an environmental set of criteria that would have to be met for those decisions to be made, and that has always been the case and continues to be the case. Look, on the specifics of my colleagues and indeed myself being concerned about climate change, of course we are. With climate change is here. We are seeing it in the extreme weather that we've had and the heat that we've had in this country. wildfires that we had in Suffolk, wildfires that we're seeing in Europe, and we've got to take it seriously. It is the first job of government to make sure that we're taking action to protect families, their homes, their businesses, their communities. And as a mother, candidly, my kids would not forgive me, your kids would not forgive you if we did not respond.
Approving more fossil fuel projects put that kind of resolve in danger?
Look, oil and gas are part of the energy mix, and that is consistent with a pathway to get to reducing our carbon emissions by 2050. That fundamental has not changed. My job as Energy Secretary is to make sure that we are driving the transition, because we must. And as I said, our kids would never forgive us if we did not do that in the here and the now today. But it also has an impact on us today. The opportunity, and this is the bit that I have to get right, is that does mean billions of investments. So if we take clean energy, £100 billion between government and the private sector we are putting in. That is investment in our communities. That is investment creating jobs of the future. So if we get this right, it's a win-win-win. The job of government is to make sure we are stepping in to do that effectively so it impacts on our communities in the right way.
Very quickly, because I ought to let you go, but Andy Burnham has really stressed that the cost of living is his big priority. One of his first announcements was a temporary cut in VAT on electricity bills. Will there be more help on energy bills to come?
Look, my number one job is getting bills down. The Prime Minister was really clear with me when he gave me the job. I'm clear about it in my own head, because candidly, energy is an essential good. People don't have a choice about whether they put their heater on or they put their fan on, or candidly, they're cooking meals for their kids. And it is not affordable at the moment. And that is a function of a whole set of things. In particular, it is a function of the fact that we are far too dependent on global markets we have no control over. And so parts of why we're investing so much in clean energy is so we've got homegrown energy now at prices that we can afford.
That's a long-term aim, but what about in the near term when people are struggling with the winter coming up?
Absolutely. So we're completely clear in our minds that people are finding it really, really tough, which is why, back in April, we took 150 quid off bills. We've made that commitment to take VAT off electricity bill. That's about £45 will be taken off going into this winter. For families on means-tested benefit, there's another £150 discount that's coming. That is all stuff we've already done. It's a down payment. We know we need to do more. My number one priority is getting bills down for consumers.
OK, well, Miata Van Buller, we appreciate you coming into the studio this morning. Thanks very much indeed.
Thank you for having me.
Now then, let's just bring you some of the day's other stories this morning and get set for more hot weather. The UK Health Security Agency has issued heat health alerts for 8 regions of England. Amber alerts will be in place for the East Midlands, East of England, South East and London regions from 9 a.m. for 24 hours. And a further 4 areas will be under a yellow alert. It's emerged that the pilot of the plane which crashed in southern Peru had reported a mechanical fault during the flight. All 13 people on board the sightseeing flight over an archaeological site died in the crash. There were 11 European tourists and 2 crew. Investigators are still gathering evidence at the scene. An investigation is underway after thieves stole a cash machine in southwest London. CCTV captured the gang hooking the machine to a car before driving off. The vehicle was later found burnt out in Leeds with the machine still inside. No arrests have yet been made. Now, this is rather staggering. Drivers have stolen an average of £200,000 worth of fuel every day since the start of the Iran war. That's according to new figures out today. So let's find out a little bit more about it. We can talk to Amelia Harper about this. I mean, those are staggering figures, Amelia. This is people basically filling up and then driving off before paying, is it?
Yeah, that's right. There are 2 means by which this is happening. The first, as you said, is by people quite literally just filling up and driving off. The second is by what's called a no means of payment, which is where you fill up the car but then have to go inside the kiosk and speak to staff and say, I have no means of paying. You then fill in a form and agree a timeline by which you then have to pay. But yes, as you said, the the number of incidents of fuel theft has risen sharply since the start of the Iran oil crisis. The number of incidents specifically has gone up by 20% since February. And it's thought that this is being driven by the rising price of fuel. And alongside this, forecourt operators are also reporting seeing rising levels of abuse, intimidation and violence being directed towards them. But let's just break down these figures. So the estimated value of unpaid fuel per day has risen from £131,000 in the 5 months leading up to February to £194,000 a day in the 5 months since. And in terms of the amount, you then have nearly 109,000 litres of fuel that are now going unpaid every day, up from nearly £88,000 of fuel before the conflict. And as I said, the industry is reporting that this is not just about fuel theft. The Petrol Retailers Association is saying alongside this, staff are seeing increasing levels of violence and abuse directed towards them from what they're calling frustrated customers. And it's being reported that they might start considering live facial recognition technology to try to tackle this, Anna.
Interesting stuff. Thanks, Amelia. Now then, Jackie's here, a little earlier than usual, just to mix it up, keep us on our toes.
Change things up a little
exactly.
bit. Exactly, and kept myself on my toes. I mean, I went off 15 minutes earlier.
Got to make sure you're here on time for me.
So,
very exacting.
Gianni Infantino, his fight to stay on as the FIFA president. Also, Commonwealth Games drew to a close last night. Bit of fun. Let's talk about that.
I'm Cordelia Lynch, Sky's Asia correspondent, based here in Bangkok.
These slums, once gripped by fear and death.
There is far less bloodshed now, but it hasn't gone away.
Who's asking you to kill?
The police will give me the orders, and after I kill the target, I throw the gun away.
We try our best to uncover and unpick a fast-changing and deeply complex region.
These large waterways provided an excellent source of body disposal.
This is the Buriganga River, where victims who'd allegedly been shot dead were dumped.
Sheikh Hasina, how confident are you that she will stand trial?
She will stand trial, there's no doubt about that.
We're going to take you to the very heart of a criminal network, going undercover inside Southeast Asia's scam centres for the very first time.
We won't have any problems with police, it's okay. Just seen Imran Khan leave, as we understand it, he's just been shot in the leg.
They have decided that the only way they'll allow elections is if I'm inside jail or killed.
Sky News get the full story first.
Chinese vessels start encircling the boat we're on, blocking its path.
The Chinese are now deploying water cannons, firing it directly towards our boat. We've discovered doctors across Delhi dishing out pills like this, claiming they will provide a lifelong cure for homosexuality.
Rohingya people fleeing an escalating civil war.
The situation here in Cox's is desperate. An already insecure place does feel a lot more precarious.
Hear that whistle and that crunch? We know that they're coming from the south of the city where there's a column of Russian armoury.
I'm Alex Crawford and I'm Sky's special correspondent based in Istanbul.
Look at that sheet of flames, and that has happened within minutes, and now it's coming from both sides, and it's moving this way.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist? I'm going to take you behind the scenes here for Election Night Live. They have gone up and up. Being a Sky News journalist.
Ed Conway, Sky News, is anyone going to talk to us? Mortgage rates did go up very sharply during your time in office. Here it is.
First off, just the scale of what we're looking at.
Our data shows it's been happening. Question is, why it hasn't been stopped.
So Jackie's here with all the sport, and we should pick up, shouldn't we, on Rob Harris's story that we led the show with this morning, that the Wales FA have been the first nation to push for Infantino to go from FIFA.
So there are 211 nations in FIFA, and before all of this debacle happened, Gianni Infantino had 200 votes. So when the vote happens next year in March, he would have been voted back in because 200 people had put letters in saying, yeah, we're going to vote for you. Wales are now the first country to come out and say, we have now withdrawn our support for Gianni Infantino. To get rid of him is not as easy as you think. I mean, to trigger a vote of no confidence and all the rest of it, it's more difficult than people are imagining. It's not a quick thing. I spoke to FIFA last night for a while and they were explaining the process to me. So Gianni Infantino needs 106 votes to stay on as president. And like I said, he had 200 before all this happened. Wales have now withdrawn. Others will withdraw. If 20% of the 211 nations want to call an extraordinary Congress and trigger a vote of no confidence, they can, but it takes 3 months. So it won't happen. You know, even if that happened today, the actual meeting wouldn't happen for 3 months. They'd also have to have a new candidate. That candidate would have to garner support and know that they've got the maths, they've got the figures to get over the line. And it takes a while. I mean, yeah, you're kind of going across the world going, will you vote for me? No, we're voting for Infantino. OK, and then you move on to the next one. And that new candidate has to be put forward, even just to be voted for in March, by November the 18th. So you're sort of still looking towards this March date when they were going to have the election anyway, and Gianni was going to be in because no one was going to oppose him. That's now very different. The other way he could be removed is the FIFA Council, which is 37 members. There's quite a few vice presidents below Infantino. Alexander Seferin of UEFA is one of them. There are several of them. If 19 of those members want to call an extraordinary meeting, they can, but that would require 19 of them going against Infantino. And I think maybe that is a process ongoing right now, but whether they can get to 19 or not remains to be seen, because he has got quite a lot of support still. You know, even though Asia came out and said, we don't agree with this plan to sell off 20% of the World Cup, he still has support in Asia. So we know that CONCACAF, North America, Central America, that confederation and UEFA completely wants him gone. But that's not enough votes to...
I mean, I guess he could step down. Didn't Sepp Blatter do that
he could,
back in 2015?
He could be advised that it's probably a good idea to step down, but I think if he knows he's still got the votes, which he may well have, it might be more difficult and he might be able to cling on to power. But it's not... The point is, it's just not a quick thing.
It's not a quick process.
It's not the way people think, oh, well, by the end of the week, he'll be gone. And I'm not sure it's...
But in the meantime, we may see more countries following Wales' lead there.
Yeah, I'm sure. Should we talk Commonwealth Games? Should we talk a bit more Wales? Emma Finucane, what a superstar. Emma Finucane of Wales, sprint cyclist, became the first sprint cyclist to win 4 gold medals at a single Commonwealth Games. 4 days, 4 successive goals, and she is now the most successful Welsh female athlete in Commonwealth Games history, which is no mean feat. So she rode the Cerrin yesterday, and then in the evening, she was carrying the team flag, the Welsh flag, at the closing ceremony. And she said, couldn't believe it. I was kind of pinching myself. Also at the closing ceremony, I don't know if you watched a bit of it, the Scottish team were given felt cone hats to wear. You can see one like their salsa.
Oh, there we go. We can see loads of them there.
Yeah, and that's a nod to the World Cup when Scottish fans were doing things with traffic cones.
Yeah, I think it actually started in Glasgow. They put traffic cones on statues.
On statues.
Yeah. And then carried it on at the World Cup.
Quite funny. It's now a thing, and it even made it into the Commonwealth Games. But you have to say that Glasgow did a great job of stepping in for Victoria when Australia pulled out and said it's too expensive, it's going to cost us $3 billion, we haven't got it. They stepped in and did it for about 150 million with, a bit of input from the Commonwealth Games committee, and did it, really well. It was probably like a sort of slimmed down version, but it worked. And there were some great stories that came out of it. If you think back over the few weeks, you got Josh Kerr, the other night being absolutely amazing and looking like he's going to dominate the world. Archie Goodburn in the swimming, who didn't get a medal but made the final, and then talked about his brain tumour and how his dream was a medal, but also to find a cure for his disease. And I suppose Adam Peaty as well Adam Peaty Ramsey was still a story because of the whole sort of drama of his comeback story. So
yeah.
All
it was frustrations as well in the pool.
Yeah, I think it was it was a good Commonwealth Games under the circumstances. It was really good.
Yes,
it was really good.
Let's talk golf.
Yeah, so Women's Open Golf was finished last night. It was won by 23-year-old Shinu Kawaki of Japan, who then had to give her acceptance speech or winner's speech in Japanese with a translator, which you don't often see in sport these days, which goes to show kind of how new she is, I guess. There she is. It was quite dramatic at the end because there was a playoff, a sudden death playoff. Esther Henslett sank this 45-foot putt. It's worth showing because it's so amazing. So she had that to stay in the competition and force the playoff, and she did it. And then in the playoff itself, her ball hit a steward and flew into a gorse bush, and then she couldn't recover from that, and so the Japanese girl ended up winning.
I'm not sure if the steward recovered.
I know. I think he was all right.
No, but all right. That's good.
Yeah, he was fine. Anyway, so it was won by Shinu Kawaki, who also picked up 1.1 million.
Oh, that's quite nice.
That's quite a nice winner's check, isn't it?
Not a bad day's work.
Not a bad day's work. We should mention football, I think. I mean, there's lots of sort of bits and pieces of football going on at the moment. You know, transfer rumours and who's going where. Bruno Guimaraes is due to turn up for Newcastle at their training camp in Spain today. But there's ongoing behind-the-scenes talks. Is he going to move to Arsenal or not? Has he turned up there? We're not sure. We're trying to find out. But 3 weeks until the start of the Premier League season, and last night in America on their pre-season tour, Liverpool were leading Leeds United 2-0, and then lost the match 4-2. I don't think Andoni Iraola saw that coming.
That's the new manager, of course, isn't it?
He's the new manager. Lots to think about. In the second half, they conceded 4 goals in 25 minutes. It was a collapse, and yeah. I suppose these games are to learn about your team, aren't they? And I definitely think he learned probably more than he wanted to yesterday. And there are obviously lots of other games going on.
So lots of those players who would have been playing at the World Cup or, all of them that tour and, do these warm-up matches, I mean, a lot of them will be exhausted.
A lot of the World Cup players won't be there.
Right.
A lot of the World Cup
on their
players are still on holiday.
Yeah.
Like we saw Jude Bellingham yesterday watching a bit of cricket because he's bought into it. But they're not back yet. So they're still on a bit of a break. Quite right as well.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't start a new season this quickly. Anyway, so they've got 3 weeks to get back off their lilos. Celtic begin their defence of the Scottish Premiership title tonight against Dundee, and that one is live on Sky. And it's all come around really quickly, hasn't it?
Football? It always does. It doesn't go away for any time at all.
No, I don't think it really does.
Which I know you, for one, really celebrate.
Yeah, I'm very glad.
Can't wait
it's
for it
going
to
to be
come
back in 3 weeks.
And you, meanwhile, will be back in an hour.
I will.
Yes. See you then. Thanks, Jackie. Let's take a look at the weather.
Dinner under the stars tonight?
That reminds me of our travel insurance.
You mean All Clear Skies?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors Sky News Weather.
Well, this week will bring some much-needed rain, but not all drought-hit areas will see it, with the south hot and humid today. England and Wales will be largely dry this morning with plenty of sunshine, but the odd shower will develop in the southwest. Elsewhere, it's going to be cloudier with some rain, most prolonged over Scotland, and it'll turn out hot and humid across southern Britain with a high of 34 degrees Celsius possible in the southeast. Most other places look much cooler.
All Clear Travel Insurance proudly sponsors Sky News Weather.
Coming up next, we're going to be taking you through stories making the headlines in today's papers. We've got journalist and author Janelle Aldred joining me in just a moment.
I witnessed the complete destruction of a place linked to my childhood memories.
This is insane.
I'm Yusra Al-Bagher, Sky's Africa correspondent based in Johannesburg, South Africa. I felt awe when we saw the mountain gorillas in Rwanda.
We call him the king of the jungle. This is the alpha silverback.
Sky News, get the full story first.
Go ahead, back white jacket.
Deborah Haynes from Sky News. He called you Daddy earlier.
No,
Do you...
he did it very affectionately. Daddy, you're my daddy. Thank you.
Leicester is on its knees.
They've ripped the soul out of my factory and there's nothing left.
It is eerily quiet.
It's constantly on the brink of capacity.
There's overcrowding. It's not a new thing.
It's rough.
There's nothing to hide. Why aren't international journalists allowed in?
Are you worried about escalation?
Of course I'm worried about escalation, which is why my focus is on de-escalation.
The region, I think, is on edge because they are anticipating a retaliation.
Iran retaliates for the US attacks.
Founding principle of the alliance, that an attack on one is an attack on all.
Could Putin attack another NATO country within 5 years?
I'm Adam Parsons, Sky's Middle East correspondent.
We've just entered Gaza. The vista out there is complete destruction.
I'll always remember going into Gaza City during the war. All around us was destruction and the sounds of battle. I witnessed the scars of the October the 7th attacks, burnt out homes, bullet holes in walls and bloodstains on the floor.
People were murdered, people were kidnapped.
The Israelis insist that many of these prisoners are terrorists, but here the Palestinians consider them a blend of freedom fighters and political prisoners. These are the settlers in waiting, keen to start a new life.
The least we can do is just kick them out of our land.
Sky News, get the full story first.
Jubilation in the streets, while some emotional.
This is a political victory for Prime Minister Modi and his Hindu Nationalist Party.
I'm Neville Lazarus and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi.
Companies like these are helping India in its trajectory to be a serious player in space exploration.
Sky News, get the full story first.
So we're going to take you through the morning papers now, and journalist and author Janelle Aldridge is here with me. She's been picking out some of the stories that have taken her interest. Very good morning to you. Lovely to see you.
Nice to see you.
I know, it's nice to have some company. I'm on my own here without you and Jackie. Let's turn to the Daily Telegraph. You've picked out their kind of picture story and the copy that goes underneath it, of course. And this is, I mean, essentially the story in Ceuta, the Spanish enclave, which saw around 60,000 migrants crossing from Morocco at the end of last week, has really focused minds on illegal immigration into this country. Andy Burnham in Dover yesterday talking about it, and other parties as well putting forward ideas.
Yeah, and so, you know, Reform are doing a press conference today. They're talking about Operation Fortress to intercept all migrant boats and return them to France or Belgium. And I think these things are easy to say, obviously very hard to do because we're still kind of working on the problem. I think most people would say Shabana Mahmood has done a decent job of kind of tackling some of the boats crossings and different things like that. She says it will be difficult for the UK to copy Spain's approach because it's trickier to tackle crossings, of course, across the sea than it is, or across the channel than it is across land. And so obviously for people over land, it's kind of much easier, but also much easier to return them. But I do think that the really interesting thing is I think Reform would have to really talk about what they're actually going to do differently. What do they think could be done differently, if not doing a pact with the French government or returning the boats? What could be different? What could be better than what we're currently doing? And the other thing that I think is
they talk about involving warships, aren't they? They're talking about the Royal Navy
and how we're going to fund that. And I think this is like lots of money. And I think the other thing that I also think that's really interesting is that there's no such thing as illegal immigrants coming into the country. There are people overstaying, or once they've been told they can't stay, then they can't come. But in terms of people coming over, if they're saying they're refugees, it's not illegal for them to come, it's illegal for them to outstay their welcome.
And yet the government would say it's an illegal route, and therefore anyone that comes in is an illegal...
Yeah, well, but it's not an illegal route, like to come into somewhere, even those people crossing that border. It's that if you come and you say, I'm seeking asylum, and then someone says, actually, no, you have no right to seek asylum, then they're illegally staying here once they've overstayed their welcome, so to speak. But I do just think it is really interesting I think Reform have got lots of different questions that lots of people want to hear about as well today. So hopefully in their press conference they'll address some of those things as well. But I do think that the Prime Minister's walking quite a tightrope in terms of he's had quite great success against Reform, you know, on kind of his policies, his plans, his way. You know, he beat them in the local election. So I think it will be interesting to see how he's going to tackle this and what they're going to say in counter to that.
Yeah, and I spoke to Miatta Fahnbulleh, the Energy Secretary, just a short while ago here, sitting next to me, and she implied that they felt that progress was being made. I mean, the Prime Minister has talked about relentless and there's more work to do, but we didn't get a sense of a dramatic change in policy.
No, and I don't think there will be, because I think people think Shabana Mahmood has managed so far with her policy to kind of get it somewhat under control.
OK, let's move on to a story that's on the front page of The Guardian. It continues inside, about an NHS trust cutting mental health jobs. What are they saying here?
So the East London Foundation Trust are slashing 330 mental health jobs. I think the headline, as always, contains not the whole story, and it's a tricky situation because we have seen stories recently where people have been discharged from mental health wards or not been supervised properly and have gone on to, you know, commit crimes. And so when things like that happen, it rightly draws our attention to mental health provision. The other thing that NHS trusts are always balancing are the books. And people don't want to hear that they're in debt, that they're not balancing the books, they're in financial difficulty. It's a really, I would say, a tricky job, and I'm glad it's not my job.
So this is why the jobs are going?
So this is why the jobs are going, because they've got to balance the books, and they have a deficit that a £25 million saving target, apparently, is what they've got to do. And that has to come from somewhere. I would probably, if I was a betting person, say that it's probably not just mental health that's taking some of the hit of that budget. Of course, I'm not in there, so I can't say that's what's happening. But I do think we have to really think about, what does the NHS mean free at the point of entry? What can we fund? We know that we can't fund everything, and so, unfortunately, some things do have to be cut back. It is what, when, how. But I think sometimes with these stories, we don't quite get the full difficulty of the choices people are making, because if your mum was up for cancer treatment, would you want to hear that that budget had been slashed and now she might not be able to get her chemos quickly? If someone's waiting for an operation, if something that's debilitating, would we want to hear that they're not going to get the life-saving treatment that they need? These are all really, really, really challenging, tough choices. But we do know that, as with everything, there's a big ripple effect. So if something does go wrong, yes, of course, people are going to look to this and say, it was the cuts, why this happened, and then we're going to ask those questions.
Yes.
So I think it's very difficult.
And a lot of challenges for the new Health Secretary, of course.
A lot.
Let's turn to the Financial Times. They have a story looking at the new chair of Ofcom, which, I mean, is a job now that's sort of changing in so many ways, isn't it? As, you know, online offerings are expanding and in many cases becoming quite problematic.
I mean, we're both young enough to remember when Ofcom started 2 decades ago, and it was
I remember pre-internet.
And the heralding of kind of, how do we control bias, how do we look at reporting? You know, we've both been through our journalist law media training where, you know, once someone's charged, you can't say this, when someone's bailed, you can't, you know. So for TV channels, we're all operating by these really stricter rules. But of course, with the online revolution and citizen journalism and everything, which I don't disagree with all of it. I think some of it's really great for opening up the media landscape. However, a lot of those people aren't then subject to the same rules. So everyone will go, well, why isn't Sky talking about this? Well, actually, legally, Sky can't, or else they're going to get a fine. But if I'm an online person, if I name someone, show a picture, for me, there's kind of no consequence unless the court wants to take 20,000 people to court for that. So Ofcom's new chair is saying it needs to be relevant for this online era. AI is on the way, so in 3 years' time, whatever they decide today is probably going to be out of date. And he's trying to say we really have to sit back and assess how can we see into the future almost.
Well, yeah, that's why it's such a challenge, because it's happening at such a pace. Keeping regulation updated is
because 3 years ago, he's saying even when the last act was passed, there weren't AI chatbots or the notification problems. So they were dealing with the now problems. I think the the challenge for Ofcom is how do they deal with what's next, not just what's now, and I think that's very, very tricky.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. Let's turn to the Eye, which has a story about the hosepipe bans that so many people across the country are now have in force. And the survey makes quite interesting reading about this.
Yeah, we've become a nation of not so much rule followers as I think we used to be. So 1 in 10 homes say they plan on ignoring it. And it's actually really interesting what one householder said. She said she pays an extortionate amount for her water. It's not her problem. The water companies would rather give their CEOs ridiculous amounts of money instead of building new reservoirs. And I do think that there is a sense of us feeling like we're not all in this together. There's been lots of stories in the media about water companies, about bonuses, about sewage being pumped into the sea. And so I think a lot of people sit back and say, well, why am I flowers taking the brunt of that thing? And I'm not saying that that's right, but I'm also saying that I do think water companies, their reputation is actually quite bad. So I think people just think, well, why am I the one that now can't have a bath while someone's being paid hundreds of thousands of pounds and shareholders are getting dividends? And I do think that's probably a little bit behind why people are not doing it. But yeah, so some people saying they're not, half of households say they support the hose pan bite, but 35% say don't oppose it, not doing it.
Question is, are your neighbours going to dob you in it? That's what I want to know.
Oh, could you imagine? I mean, I wouldn't. Would you? No, I don't think I'd dob my neighbour in for that. Probably not.
No, I wouldn't. They wouldn't anyway. Very nice neighbours. Let's move on to, very finally, to, we've got about a minute, I think. The Daily Mail, I'm leaping ahead because I want to talk about parents who say that summer holidays are too long.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have children myself. I have a couple of stepchildren, but I can...
It's here.
I can see how... Yes, I can see how parents might think, let's get to the end, trying to fill people's time. Life is really expensive. Kids eat a lot of food. They need a lot of stuff. And so I think nearly a quarter of parents are already counting down the days to September, which is actually quite far away. It's a month away.
It is.
So they've got a lot of
days. They've just started, haven't they?
You
would have thought, though, that obviously there are so many challenges with this hot weather, and it's not a laughing matter for farmers. We've heard about some warnings on front of the papers about potential food shortages because harvests are affected. But when it comes to kids, hot weather is a bit of a gift, isn't it? There's so much more you can do outside.
You can go outside, you can play outside, but then I don't think a lot of kids are playing outside like how we used to play outside, which for my one was that the lamppost down there, don't go past it, you know, but anywhere within that realm you could go. And I think kids maybe are not spending as much time outside and fun, but hopefully the weather encourages a bit of that.
Janelle, thanks very much indeed. I'm going to see you again in the next hour, but for the moment, thanks very much indeed, and stay with us for Top Stories.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
Who's funnier?
Being a Sky News journalist.
A special edition of The World with me, Yalda Hakim.
Pakistan had the right to respond.
You're like, what?
Historic day here today.
Congratulations, this is a huge moment.
But what happens now?
Hello, a very good morning. It's 8 o'clock. This is Mornings with me, Anna Jones. Here's how things are looking. The first pin falls against Gianni Infantino. The Welsh FA says it won't back him to be re-elected as FIFA president. Donald Trump says negotiations to end the war with Iran will begin this afternoon after calling off a wave of weekend strikes. The longest ballot paper in British political history. We preview the upcoming Clacton by-election following the resignation of Nigel Farage. Also today, we'll see what's making the headlines in today's newspapers with journalist and author Janelle Aldred. Plus, the dramatic smash and grab as thieves make off with a cash machine after tying it to their car. Hello, a very good morning. Thanks for joining us here today. Our top story, Sky News can reveal that Wales has become the first football association to officially withdraw support for Gianni Infantino to be re-elected as president of FIFA. This follows the loss of confidence in Infantino's leadership after that botched attempt to sell off a stake in the World Cup. Our sports correspondent Rob Harris has the story.
Well, this crisis facing Gianni Infantino is developing at all hours of the day and night, and I've just heard from the Football Association of Wales exclusively that they have written to FIFA to tell them they have withdrawn their support for Gianni Infantino's re-election next year. This is, we expect, the start of a cascade of letters from across Europe to pile pressure on Infantino to leave office after his botched attempts to sell off stakes in the World Cup to private investors. This crisis is escalating now on Infantino. We've had the loss of confidence in his leadership from UEFA on Saturday. Now the start of a new week is beginning with an attempt to force action from him, because we've still not heard from Gianni Infantino since the European football associations withdrew their support on Saturday. And we also heard from the North American Confederation as well that they didn't back him too at the moment in terms of his leadership. Well, this is what I've just heard exclusively from the Football Association of Wales. This is their statement to Sky News. The Football Association of Wales hereby confirms its withdrawal of support for the candidature of Mr. Gianni Infantino for re-election as FIFA president for the 2027-2031 term. The recent failures in good governance, processes, leadership values, stakeholder management, communications, and sound judgment have led us to a position where Mr. Infantino has lost the confidence of the FAW to remain at the helm of world football. Failing to put the best interests of football first is a failure we cannot accept. That is damning. Wales does have a significant role in world football. In February, they were hosting Gianni Infantino for a major meeting. The laws of football are set by the body called the International Football Association Board. It's made up of 8 votes, half are held by FIFA, the other 4 by the home UK associations, including Wales. So that gives Wales a lot of clout in the world. And this is an attempt to start the momentum from within Europe to see that Infantino doesn't stand for re-election, but there's a desire to see him lose office sooner. On Sunday, we discovered that UEFA had threatened Gianni Infantino with legal action over this attempt to sell off shares in the World Cup. They've told him to retain all documentation, and this really is a significant and growing rebellion facing Gianni Infantino, who's been in power for 10 years, but now is on the brink and could well be forced out of office in disgrace. We've still not heard from him since he revealed exclusively to Sky News in the early hours of Saturday morning that he was abandoning the attempts to sell off those stakes by launching a new commercial venture for the World Cup that he valued at $20 billion, trying to raise $4.2 billion. He was saying it's about making more money for football associations around the world. He's been told by many, including his senior advisor, Carlos Cordero, who quit last week, it's a bad deal for football. And the concern is that cronyism has led to this, his links to Donald Trump and an attempt to make money out of it himself. But this, we now have exclusively that Wales has become the first football association worldwide to withdraw its support for Gianni Infantino's re-election bid next year in an attempt to pile on the pressure to see him leave office.
Yeah, really interesting to see whether other countries follow Wales's lead. We'll be chatting about that with Jackie at about hour. She'll be here to talk through all the fallout. And then at 9:30, we're going to be joined by the football writer Henry Winter to get his take on it as well. So plenty more on this throughout the morning. To the Iran war now, and Donald Trump says that negotiations with Iran will begin this afternoon after calling off an intense wave of strikes planned for the weekend. Travelling on Air Force One, the president said he decided to cancel the large-scale attack after hearing from Gulf leaders.
Well, now what we're doing is we're talking to them in the form of a negotiation. It begins tomorrow afternoon, and we'll see if it's true. I'd love to do that, save a lot of lives, save a lot of unnecessary power, to be honest with you. It would take many, many years to ever build it back. If it could, I don't think it would be even buildable back. So we had an attack that would be the biggest attack since World War II, and it would have been disastrous for them, and they didn't want us to do it. And frankly, Saudi Arabia didn't want it either. They thought that a deal is imminent.
Now, a British pilot is recovering after surviving a mid-air helicopter collision while battling wildfires in Greece. This happened in the central Attica region of the country. 2 others died after the helicopters crashed into one another. Barnaby Papadopoulos reports.
This is the moment 2 firefighting helicopters collided in mid-air. The crew of one helicopter, a Greek national and a British citizen, were both found safe and well by search and rescue teams. The crew members on board the other, one Greek, one Danish, both died in the crash. Over 500 firefighters are battling these flames northwest of Athens. At least 100 homes have already been destroyed and over 1,000 people have been evacuated. Hours before Sunday's fatal collision, the country's Prime Minister warned that firefighting aircraft might struggle to fly due to high winds. Kyriakos Mitsotakis warned that his country faced extremely difficult days ahead, high winds both fanning the flames and hampering efforts to bring them under control. Already, wildfires in Greece have claimed the lives of 3 firefighters in the Peloponnese and on the islands of Crete. The end of July saw huge wildfires in areas of France and Spain. These are now under control, but with such high temperatures, the risk of further fires can't be ruled out. For now, though, it appears that as the danger eases slightly in the west of Europe, it is increasing in its east. For Greece, tragedy in the air as well as on the ground, as the wildfires continue to burn on. Barnaby Papadopoulos, Sky News.
The Prime Minister insists his government will be relentless in tackling small boat crossings. Andy Burnham made the pledge while meeting emergency workers in Dover. Our political correspondent Lucy Midade reports.
This image could come back to haunt Andy Burnham or hail him the leader who succeeded where others didn't. Beside him, a boat that carried 96 migrants across the Channel in May, among those on board men, women and young children. They're the scenes that have become all too familiar, ones that successive governments still haven't managed to stop.
We have to deal with the issue rather than play politics with the issue. Just deal with it, head on, grip it, and then make the changes that will bring that reassurance to the public. It's about changing the whole approach, and slowly but surely we are putting in place those building blocks of a very different approach to this issue. It's working, but there's more to be done.
But as Andy Burnham says, these pictures don't actually tell the full story. Small boat crossings initially went up after Keir Starmer came to power, but the official data shows numbers have since fallen. At the start of this year, that dipped significantly and continued to gradually decline. But that doesn't mean the boats have stopped. And since Andy Burnham took over, in just 2 weeks, we've seen more than 2,000 people arrive on UK shores. The weather is, of course, a factor, but the government is pointing to policy. So, for example, a deal with France was renewed fairly recently at a cost of £662 million. What's it paying for? Well, more police officers on French beaches, more surveillance technology, so like drones along the coastline, to intercept criminal gangs. In Dover, these officers try and track down the people smugglers behind the channel crossings. They've more than doubled in number since the start of 2025. But while the government believes these measures are working, others say they're not going far enough.
Since this Prime Minister came to office, he's not even been in post 2 weeks. More than 2,000 people have arrived and several people have been found dead in the Channel. This is a huge problem. It requires a real sizable solution. The solution's there. The National Crime Agency have told us, the people at home know, people who come into this country must be detained and must be deported.
Scenes like this have heightened tensions in recent days. Around 60,000 migrants have crossed from Morocco to the Spanish territory of Ceuta in northern Africa. Unprecedented pictures, prompting critics to blame Spain for being too liberal on immigration. So while back home the new Prime Minister might be somewhat satisfied with government progress, he also knows this is the issue that has plagued his predecessors. Complacency could not only cost him his job, but Labour the next election. Lucy McDade, Sky News, in Dover.
Well, you heard from Lucy there about the crisis in the Spanish enclave of Ceuta, where tens of thousands of migrants crossed from Morocco. Well, the European Union will hold emergency talks on the issue tomorrow after Italy reinstated border checks on arrivals from Spain. And it's also caused anger on the Spanish mainland. Around 1,500 protesters took to the streets of Madrid to demand the Spanish government to take action. Around 60,000 people crossed into Ceuta, but most have now returned voluntarily, although at least 86 people died in the chaos. Well, back here, Reform UK say they would launch what they call the largest military operation in the English Channel since World War II to stop small boat arrivals from France. Well, earlier I asked the Energy Secretary, Miata Fahnbulleh, about that idea.
Candidly, we're not going to take advice from Reform about how we get to grips with this, because the set of people they've got in charge in Reform were the set of people who were in the government at the time when we saw this crisis. We think we do have an approach that's working. We just have to be, we've got to be focused, we've got to be relentless. It's down by 50%. There is more that we need to do. We recognise that, but the approach is working.
Well, let's bring in our political correspondent, Alex Rogers, who's here. So tell us a little bit about this plan being put forward by Reform and what the reaction has been generally.
So Reform are saying they want the largest military operation in the English Channel since World War II, and that they want to send the Royal Navy into the Channel to basically intercept these boats and send them back to France and Belgium. Now, as you would expect, Labour and the Tories are pouring cold water on this plan. They think it's a non-starter. That's because, well, essentially, there's no incentive for France to agree to this deal. Labour thinks that taking this approach risks inflaming tensions with France right at a point when we've got a deal with them to patrol French beaches, which is actually bringing the number of crossings down at the moment. It's 43% lower this year than it is on the same period last year. There's also a fear that taking the Navy into water like that would risk fatalities in the Channel, which is obviously something that everyone wants to avoid. So for the opposition parties, they're saying that this is just headline grabbing to distract Reform from some of the issues they're going through internally at the moment.
But definitely what's happened in Ceuta is concentrating political minds, isn't it? And focusing on our own issues of migration. We saw Andy Burnham going to Dover yesterday, as we saw in Lucy's report there. I mean, this is really getting the parties talking.
That's right, Anna. And Andy Burnham did say on Sunday that it was worrying. He did say it was a matter for the Spanish government, but as you say, those scenes, those images of people crossing into the border have kick-started the evergreen conversation that we have about migration and the small boats crisis here. Labour saying they're bringing the crossings down, but we are seeing more and more reports of people smugglers adopting and changing their tactics to get around the increased enforcement that they're coming up against on some of the French beaches. So the numbers fluctuate. There's been 2,000 in the 2 weeks since Andy Burnham became Prime Minister. So it really does fluctuate, and it may be that Labour say that it's down now, but maybe we see an increase next year.
Indeed. Alex, thanks very much indeed. And we will be talking to Reform shortly on some of those issues and their plans. Thanks very much indeed. Well, still on politics, voters in Clacton are being asked to pick an MP for the 6th time in 12 years next week after Nigel Farage resigned in early July in the midst of a parliamentary investigation. Well, despite Reform being the only major party to put a candidate forward, there's a record 34 names on the ballot. Our political correspondent Ali Fortescue takes a look at what's to come.
So the media circus is once again rolling into Clacton. Are we just looking at more political stunts?
You would rather a bin representing you in Parliament than Nigel Farage?
Yeah. Or is there something more interesting going on here? A quick reminder of why this by-election is happening in the first place.
No, I've decided that the people of Clacton should be the judges of my actions. This will be a people versus the establishment by-election.
There are a record 34 candidates standing in this by-election, but apart from Reform UK, the other main parties, so the Conservatives, Labour, the Lib Dem, the Greens, are not standing until after that parliamentary probe into the £5 million gift received by Nigel Farage has completed. He, of course, says he's done nothing wrong, and the reason that he's willing to gamble in Clacton is because he knows the level of support he has, which, to be fair, is hard to miss.
Do you mind me asking who you're going to vote for?
Oh, Reform. I'll give you a guess.
Nigel Farage?
There you go.
Farage.
Why?
I like him, and I think he's very upfront.
Would you vote for Farage, Nigel Farage?
Yes, absolutely.
Yes. Did you vote for him last time?
No.
But interestingly, the other name that has come up is this one.
I actually will be voting for Count Binface.
May the best life form win and make your votes count.
Some of his manifesto is a bit of a jibe and a bit of a joke. I think, you know, someone new, I think it'd be something fresh.
He's the only alternative to Nigel Farage, and I'd like to see Nigel Farage lose his seat.
The widespread expectation is that Nigel Farage will win here, but people aren't just voting for what they want, they are voting for what they don't want. We have seen so much tactical voting recently in Gorton and Denton, in Makerfield. It is particularly striking here that there is at least a level of organisation round Count Binface. People are willing to vote for a novelty candidate to try to stop Nigel Farage.
There won't be a get-out-the-vote operation in any formal sense from the other parties. Supporters of those parties who don't fancy going and tactically voting for Count Binface really don't have, or another candidate, really don't have much of a reason to head out to the polls, probably. So I do think we probably should expect turnout to be depressed.
You don't have to look far to see that we are in Reform UK territory here. This is a constituency that is predominantly older, white, Brexit voting. Remember, it was the first UKIP seat in the country. Reform UK sources tell me that they hope they can get 80% of the vote share. Turnout will probably be low. They think this gamble is going to pay off. We will soon find out if Nigel Farage has overplayed his hand.
And you can watch Ali's full report by scanning the QR code that you can see on your screen right now. Let's just bring you some of the day's other stories now and get set for more hot weather. The UK Health Security Agency has issued heat health alerts for 8 regions of England. Amber alerts will be in place for the East Midlands, the East of England, the South East and London regions from 9 a.m. for 24 hours, and a further 4 areas will be under a yellow alert. It's emerged that the pilot of the plane which crashed in southern Peru had reported a mechanical fault during the flight. All 13 people on board the sightseeing flight over an archaeological site died in the crash. There were 11 European tourists and 2 crew. Investigators are still gathering evidence of the scene. Ukrainian drone strikes have killed 8 people in Russia, including a child in a playground. The local governor said a 13-year-old girl died and 2 other children were wounded in the attack. In Pakistan, at least 14 people have been killed by a suicide bomber while they were taking part in a rally against militant groups. More than 24 others were wounded in the attack in Kabul, a town in the Swat Valley. Demonstrators had gathered near a police station chanting anti-militant slogans and demanding peace. There's been no immediate claim of responsibility by any group. And an investigation is underway after thieves stole a cash machine in southwest London. CCTV captured the gang hooking the machine to a car before driving off, ripping it out of the ground. No arrests have yet been made. Now then, I find these figures extraordinary. Drivers have stolen an average of £200,000 worth of fuel every day since the start of the Iran war. That's according to new figures that are out today. So let's find out a little bit more. Amelia Harper is in the newsroom for us. And Amelia, this is people who fill up with petrol and then just drive off without paying. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Nearly got the figures wrong there, Anna, but it's a lot higher than that.
Wildly underestimated it.
Yeah, you did. No, but it is a lot higher than that. And the story, the news this morning, is that the amount of fuel that is being stolen at UK petrol stations has risen sharply since the start of the Iran oil crisis, and incidents of petrol theft have risen by 20% since February, and it's thought that this is being driven by the war in Iran. And it's not just this. Forecourt staff are also recording facing growing levels of abuse and violence and intimidation by what are being called frustrated customers. Let's go through the figures. So it's estimated that the value of unpaid fuel per day has risen from around £131,000 in the 5 months leading up to February to £194,000 a day in the 5 months since. And what this means is that nearly 109,000 litres of fuel are now going unpaid every day, up from nearly 88,000 litres before the conflict. And as you alluded to, just as you were bringing me in there are a couple of different methods by which this is happening. One of them is when a driver says that they cannot pay, having filled up with fuel. And what happens is that you go in to speak to forecourt staff and you fill out a form and you say that you can't pay and you agree a timeline by which you should pay. Then the second is simply when drivers drive off, having filled up their car. And as I said, it isn't just fuel that the industry is concerned about. It is also the treatment, the levels of aggression towards forecourt staff. The Petrol Retailers Association is saying that staff are facing, since February, growing levels of aggression, and it means that petrol forecourts, it's reported, are now considering using facial recognition software to try to tackle this.
OK, Amelia, thanks very much indeed. Well, let's return to the issue of migration and bring in Reform's UK Home Affairs spokesperson Zia Youssef to talk about his party's plans this morning. Morning to you, Zia Youssef. Thanks for talking to us. You've said that Reform UK wants to launch the largest military operation in the English Channel since World War II to stop small boat arrivals across the Channel. Why do you think it's necessary to get the military involved?
Well, north of 200,000 people have now landed on our beaches illegally over the last 8 years. Some have gone on to murder British citizens in brutal fashion. Some have attempted mass casualty terror attacks on our shores. And the Tory and Labour governments met that invasion with a free ferry service and free hotels at taxpayer expense. Reform will respond with, as you said, the biggest military operation in the English Channel since World War II. It's called Operation Fortress. It is engineered and endorsed by several senior members of His Majesty's armed forces. This is the way that we actually stop the boats. You look at what Australia did. You know, between 2007 and 2013, they had an enormous issue with small boat illegal migrant arrivals, including the fact that 1,200 of those people tragically died making that journey within weeks of using their military to make a clear statement. Not one of those vessels will reach their shores. Small boat arrivals fell 100% within a matter of weeks, and deaths fell to zero. There wasn't a single migrant death during those operations. The precedent is there. We're more than capable of it. The simple fact is the Tories and Labour lack the political will and the courage. We are unwilling to continue to allow hundreds of thousands of unvetted, largely men of military age from countries like Iran, Iraq and Syria to arrive on our beaches illegally and then cost British taxpayers tens and hundreds of billions of pounds.
But Nigel Farage said last year that towing boats back to France would be an absolute last resort. So what's changed, given as well that the number of crossings is down this year compared to last year, 43% lower than the number recorded this time last year?
Well, the first point in terms of numbers, a lot of that is simply down to weather. We've just seen enormous numbers start to come. We're seeing records broken almost every week. We had 165 in one boat. We've had thousands since Andy Burnham became Prime Minister, 700 in a single day. And as I said, it only takes
But still,
one.
43% down is going in the right direction, isn't it?
Well, the numbers are still absolutely enormous, and there's no sign of the problem actually ending. It only takes one of these people to actually, for example, commit, God forbid, a mass casualty terror attack. And I want to make sure your viewers understand this is not speculation. Our brilliant security services have foiled multiple attempted terror attacks on our shores by people who came across the channel illegally. We know that the Iranian regime is sending agents with that express intent using this route. This is a national security emergency. Look, we're unwilling to use our military to secure our border and defend it against an invading force of hundreds of thousands of people, then I couldn't give you a better reason to use them. It is absolutely necessary. With regards to Nigel's comments previously, yes, it is a last resort. It is a last resort, but we are there now. I don't know how many people would need to arrive for us. Is it millions illegally on our beaches? And similarly, God forbid, and it pains me to even say this, God forbid, if we don't want to wait for one of these terrorists to actually succeed on a mission, God forbid, in this country, to actually do something about it. All that's required is the political will. We're publishing an in-depth plan at 11 a.m. today. As I said, it's devised and endorsed by former senior members of our armed forces. We have to stop the boats from coming. We have to prioritise the safety of British people.
Will this work? I mean, have you secured an agreement with France to accept every person that the Navy would turn around and send back?
Well, one of the challenges of not being in government is you're unable to negotiate with other countries.
But are they likely
although we
to
might
agree
have more,
to that?
So what our plan envisages is two scenarios. One in which the French consent to our Marines arriving with these migrants on French shores. But the plan also envisages a scenario which is absolutely possible. We acknowledge that the French object to it. Should they object to it, then of course we basically get into a big diplomatic argument with the French. And I would remind your viewers, who no doubt already know, that Tory and Labour governments have already sent France £1 billion of taxpayers' money to, quote, stop the boats. The official position of the French government and the Élysée Palace is they don't want those boats leaving their shores. So what our military would be doing is, in fact, actually assisting the French with complying with their with the contract they've already signed. And the second point, the final point I want to make, forgive me, is this is a humanitarian mission. 1 in every 100 illegal migrants making the journey across the Channel sadly died. 4 died last week. And as the Australians have shown, if you bring in the military, not only are there no deaths, the boat's crisis stopped. We don't want British people being killed by people who come across on small boats. Neither do we want illegal migrants being killed. The status quo is unacceptable. That's why we have to do this.
OK, well, just to go back briefly to that point about the French agreement, essentially the central promise of your policy depends on the cooperation of a government that's not yet agreed to it. That is still leaves that very open.
Sorry, just can I just correct that? Sorry. So the plan envisages a scenario A in which France does comply, which I acknowledge then is easier. But we also acknowledge there's a chance that the French object to it. But the manner in which, if the French object to it, then, as I said, we go back to the negotiating table about the money that Britain's paying France for this, and we get into a diplomatic argument. Now, if we're unwilling to have a diplomatic argument with the Élysée Palace about the invasion of Britain via France by these people, then what on earth are we willing to have a diplomatic argument about?
OK, but still discussions to be had. On the issue of safety, the Tories are pointing out this morning that defence ministers told the Commons that warships sit too high off the water to take people safely off dinghies. I mean, this could actually be a dangerous operation, couldn't it?
No, it would be protecting and saving lives. So again, the document which we published 11 a.m. will show this. So there are multiple vessels involved. We're not using Marines are not going straight from a warship onto a dinghy. They'd be going from an offshore patrol vessel. Those vessels have RHIBs, which are rigid-hulled inflatable boats, which are very small, highly maneuverable, comparable in size to what appropriate in size for the task at hand. They go up right alongside and they take these migrants who are obviously in distress, some of whom might need treatment, and take them back to France. And I really want to emphasize there is precedent for this. The Royal Navy has an exemplary record in places like the Horn of Africa and during the Troubles, for example, of conducting these exact sort of missions.
OK, I just want to ask you a couple of other questions. A number of national polls have put Labour ahead of Reform recently, albeit narrowly, but that's the first time for more than a year. You've also had a couple of election results that you might be a little bit disappointed by Reform's performance. Do you think questions over the funding of your party are putting voters off?
Well, look, we have had a few election results that have been disappointing, and we acknowledge that. We look at that. We want to keep learning, and we want to keep listening to voters and making sure that we're making the case for why we need a reformed government. I think, if we look at what's happened with Andy Burnham, he's arrived. It's generally perfectly normal. Historically, even prime ministers that left with record levels of unpopularity, like Keir Starmer. Keir Starmer had a very similar level of popularity to Andy Burnham has now. So that's not surprising in any way. Neither is it surprising that, the polling momentum that we had, where we went from sort of 14 to 32% in a straight line in a matter of months, was sustainable for 5 years. So things do go up and down. Here's the most important point. Britain is in dire straits right now. We have a border that is unprotected and undefended. We have north of 1 million illegal migrants in this country. Law and order for many people is simply not working. Okay. Taxes are too high. I could go on. And so our view is there's only one party on the right with a real chance of a majority under our voting system, a first past the post system, of turning this country around. We're going to continue to work really hard to win everybody in this country who believes in those values, their vote.
You talk about the right. Rupert Lowe has offered a pact with Reform to unite the right. Would Reform be willing to team up with Restore Britain?
Well, as Nigel said on Twitter yesterday, he's open, we're open to talking to anyone from any political party that shares the values that we just talked about there, that wants, for example, as I said, illegal migrants to be deported from the country, for our borders to be secured, all the things we just had a discussion about with regards to our plan in the Channel. The fundamental point, though, is that, for example, coalition, I know enough about British history to know coalition governments never actually achieve anything useful. They disappoint everybody. There is only one party with a real chance of beating Labour. The next general election, whenever it is, will be a straight-up battle between Reform and Labour. We don't take anyone's vote for granted, but what we're going to do is make the case that Reform are the party to do the things that those people want, and we'll continue to work really hard to earn their vote.
OK, I have to let you go, but Zia, Youssef, we appreciate your time this morning. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's take a look now at what the weather's doing.
You're looking happy.
Well, the forecast looks good.
So you've sorted the travel insurance then?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors Sky News Weather.
Well, this week will bring some much-needed rain, but not all drought-hit areas will see it, with the south hot and humid today. England and Wales will be largely dry this morning, with plenty of sunshine, but the odd shower will develop in the southwest. Elsewhere, it'll be cloudier with some rain, most prolonged over Scotland. It'll turn out hot and humid across southern Britain, with a high of 34 degrees Celsius possible in the southeast. Most other places look cooler. And the afternoon will bring showers or longer spells of rain, with some thundery downpours possible.
All Clear Travel Insurance proudly sponsors Sky News Weather.
So Jackie is here to tell us what you got coming up in the sport shortly.
We will have the latest on Gianni Infantino's fight to hold on as FIFA president. Also talk a little bit about the Commonwealth Games, which finished last night with cone hats, gold medals, flags, you name it. We'll talk about that.
And kilts.
And kilts, yeah.
I'm Cordelia Lynch, Sky's Asia correspondent, based here in Bangkok.
These slums, once gripped by fear and death.
There is far less bloodshed now, but it hasn't gone away.
Who's asking you to kill?
The police will give me the orders, and after I kill the target, I throw the gun away.
We try our best to uncover and unpick a fast-changing and deeply complex region.
These large waterways provided an excellent source of body disposal.
This is the Buriganga River, where victims who'd allegedly been shot dead were dumped.
Sheikh Hasina, how confident are you that she will stand trial?
She will stand trial, there's no doubt about that.
We're going to take you to the very heart of a criminal network, going undercover inside Southeast Asia's scam centres for the very first time.
We won't have any problems with police, it's okay. Just seen Imran Khan leave, and as we understand it, he's just been shot in the leg.
They have decided that the only way they'll allow elections is if I'm inside jail or killed.
Sky News get the full story first.
Chinese vessels start encircling the boat we're on, blocking its path.
The Chinese are now deploying water cannons, firing it directly towards our boat. We've discovered doctors across Delhi dishing out pills like this, claiming they will provide a lifelong cure for homosexuality.
Rohingya people fleeing an escalating civil war.
The situation here in Cox's is desperate. An already insecure place does feel a lot more precarious.
Hear that whistle and that crunch? We know that they're coming from the south of the city where there's a column of Russian armoury. I'm Alex Crawford and I'm Sky's special correspondent based in Istanbul.
Look at that sheet of flames, and that has happened within minutes, and now it's coming from both sides, and it's moving this way.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist? I'm going to take you behind the scenes here for Election Night Live. They have gone up and up being a Sky News journalist.
Ed Conway, Sky News, is anyone going to talk to us? Mortgage rates did go up very sharply during your time in office. Here it is.
First off, just the scale of what we're looking at.
Our data shows it's been happening. Question is why it hasn't been stopped.
So Jackie's here with all the sport, and still a lot of talk around FIFA, and a lot of pressure seems to be building on Gianni Infantino.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But the question is, you know, if he were to go, how quickly it could happen. And I was chatting to FIFA last night and said, what's the process, how long? And it seems like it's not a fast thing. So actually, could be quite a long process. So we've heard that Wales have withdrawn their letter of support, and I guess that several other nations will put in their letters withdrawing support for Infantino. He did actually have 200 support letters before this whole thing blew up last week. So he was a shoo-in to be voted in the next elections in March. Now, not so much, but the question is how many votes does he have? So there are 211 member nations. If 20% of them want to call an extraordinary Congress, they can call it, but it takes 3 months. So they probably have the numbers to do that, but it will take 3 months. You also have to have another candidate who you can say, and we would like this person. They have to garner votes and support and get the numbers.
And that's not straightforward, is it, when it's a global organisation?
No, and everyone's on different time zones, and you know you've got to get the numbers. Otherwise, what's the point in putting someone up to oppose him if you're not going to win that? There's talk of Victor Montagliani, who's from CONCACAF, also a vice president on the FIFA Council. He's very popular. He's Canadian, and it's thought that he would be a good candidate because he's not from Europe, and it's not this sort of idea that Europe once again ganging up on everybody else in FIFA, all of the other nations. What will be quicker is the FIFA Council. They make all the key decisions in FIFA. There are 37 members. If 19 of those members want to call an extraordinary meeting to ask him to go and call a vote of no confidence, they can, and that's quicker. And that'll be a couple of weeks. Obviously, Gianni Infantino sits at the top of it as president, but there are several vice presidents, including Seferin, but there are 8 of them. And that would be a quicker process. And he's already under pressure from them, I think, for the Balogun red card. That's all got to be investigated, amongst other things.
Well, yeah, and could it get to the point where he just thinks, I'm going to have to step down? I know I've lost support. It's going to be really hard to push anything through, and I've lost the confidence of countries.
I think, well, obviously the pressure is growing. I don't think he will stand down unless he knows the writing is absolutely on the wall, and there are countries that have come out in support of him. So he might still have the numbers. He needs 106 to win the election. The election is in March. For someone to oppose him, their name must be in by November the 18th. So you need to get a solid candidate who you know will get the numbers. But, you know, although CONCACAF in Europe, so the Americas and all the European nations, are behind removing him, you've got so many parts of the world that are actually still in support of him. You know, South America, Africa, Qatar has come out in support of him. Some of the Asian group have come out in support of him. So he still has support. It's just the question is how much support does he have?
And is this all about his plan that lasted a matter of days to sell off parts of the World Cup to investors, or does it go deeper than that?
I think it goes deeper than that. I think the FIFA Council, who make all the big decisions, I think they wanted answers to several things from the World Cup, and not least that red card, using political interference from Donald Trump to overturn an American's red card. I mean, that is an absolute no-no. And that they want answers over that. So there's things like that. There are things like, so many people did not agree with cutting up the match into quarters, introducing water breaks, i.e. ad breaks. A lot of people didn't like that. The half-time also being elongated in the final to half an hour, that wasn't liked either. And it was just all sort of smacked of the Americanisation of world football. And I think there are several things that just went by the by. The Peace Prize, as you mentioned in the break.
Yeah.
There are several things that he's got to answer for.
Yeah. So interesting to see how much pressure builds and how quickly.
And how quickly, I think, is the key. Because I think the longer it goes on, this will kind of die down a bit, as things tend to do.
Whether it's got momentum or not.
Yes.
Let's move us on, because Commonwealth Games came to an end last night.
It came to an end. I think well done Glasgow for scrambling together a pretty good Commonwealth Games when you only had 18 months to do it, because Australia pulled out. Funny how Australia pulled out of hosting the Games and then came over and actually won everything.
Yeah, they came top of the medal table, didn't they? Yeah.
That was quite annoying. But nevertheless, it was really good. Speaking of, we were talking of the Welsh removing their vote from Infantino. It was very much about Emma Finucane, another Welsh girl yesterday, making history, winning 4 goals in track cycling. She's the first sprint cyclist ever to do this. No one's ever done it in one Commonwealth Games. She's the most successful Welsh athlete in a Commonwealth Games, and she's only 23, so there's only more good things to come from her. The closing ceremony was kind of fun. It was all done very quickly. I think netball was played in the morning, then they scrambled together a new set for the closing ceremony in the evening. Scotland athletes were the best, weren't they? They just turned up in their felt traffic cone hats.
I love that. This becomes such a thing, hasn't it? Kilts as well, apparently.
And kilts as well. There were good stories that came out of it. I know a lot of people poo-pooed the Commonwealth Games, saying, what's the point when key athletes don't take part in it anymore? Archie Goodburn in swimming with the brain tumour and making it to the final. The whole Adam Peaty story of back in the pool, not getting the medal that he wanted, really over-analysing it. That's the story. Josh Kerr winning the mile just so comprehensively. And Emma Finucane. I mean, there were really good stories that came out of it.
Really good stories, all a great watch.
Women's golf last night as well finished. The Open finished at Royal Lytham, and it was won by Shino Kawaki of Japan, 23 years old, picking up the winner's prize and trophy for 1.1 million. She hadn't really won outside her own tour before, so this was actually really quite an extraordinary victory. It was quite dramatic at the end. There was a playoff. Esther Henseleit forced the playoff, the German golfer, by sinking this. So Shino was in the clubhouse thinking she'd won. If that hadn't gone in, she would have won, but it did go in. What a monster putt under massive pressure to force the playoffs. The playoff happened, and then Henseleit hit one of the one of the on-field marshals with her ball on the second playoff hole. It then sort of diverted into a gorse bush, and then she couldn't make par after that, and that was kind of the end. A bit of a sad end, having the heroics of the last hole to do that, and then actually go into a gorse bush.
End up in a bush. That is
yes,
yeah.
I know, but well done, Shino Kawaki. Brilliant. 3 weeks until the start of the Premier League season. It's not long to go. Last night, Liverpool overnight in America on their tour of America were beating Leeds United 2-0, and then they lost 4-2. So 4 goals conceded in the second half in just 25 minutes.
Their new manager, Iraola, will be thinking, oh.
Yeah, kind of lots to think about. I mean, I don't know how much store people or managers set on pre-season matches, because you're missing a lot of your players, your players that were at the World Cup who are still on their break. You can't play the team that perhaps you would play at the start of the season or 2 weeks in, all the rest of it. So I don't know how much you can read into that, but actually maybe it's quite good to lose because you do learn quite a lot.
That's so
rather than if you just won 4-0 and gone, oh yeah, we're great.
Yeah, that's
you
true.
Lose.
Good positive message for Liverpool fans out there.
Celtic actually begin the defence of their Scottish Premiership title tonight, which is exciting. Another era for Martin O'Neill in Scotland versus Dundee, live on Sky.
Good to have you talking football again. It's been at least a week. Jackie, thanks very much.
To be honest,
indeed.
I don't think it stopped at all, did it really?
No. See you in the next hour. Thanks very much indeed. And do stay with us because we're going to be going through the newspapers once again with journalist and author Janelle Aldred after the break.
I witnessed the complete destruction of a place linked to my childhood memories.
This is insane.
I'm Yusra Al-Bagher, Sky's Africa correspondent based in Johannesburg, South Africa. I felt awe when we saw the mountain gorillas in Rwanda.
We call him the king of the jungle. This is the alpha silverback.
Sky News, get the full story first.
Go ahead, back white jacket.
Deborah Haynes from Sky News. He called you Daddy earlier.
No, he did it very affectionately. Daddy, you're my daddy. Thank you.
Leicester is on its knees.
They've ripped the soul out of my factory and there's nothing left.
It is eerily quiet.
It's constantly on the brink of capacity.
There's overcrowding. It's not a new thing.
It's rough.
There's nothing to hide. Why aren't international journalists allowed in?
Are you worried about escalation?
Of course I'm worried about escalation, which is why my focus is on de-escalation.
The region, I think, is on edge because they are anticipating a retaliation.
Iran retaliates for the US attacks.
Founding principle of the alliance, that an attack on one is an attack on all.
Could Putin attack another NATO country within 5 years?
I'm Adam Parsons, Sky's Middle East correspondent. I've just entered Gaza. The vista out there is complete destruction. I'll always remember going into Gaza City during the war. All around us was destruction and the sounds of battle. I witnessed the scars of the October the 7th attacks, burnt out homes, bullet holes in walls and bloodstains on the floor.
People were murdered, people were kidnapped.
The Israelis insist that many of these prisoners are terrorists, but here the Palestinians consider them a blend of freedom fighters and political prisoners. These are the settlers in waiting, keen to start a new life.
The least we can do is just kick them out of our land.
Sky News, get the full story first.
Jubilation in the streets, while some emotional.
This is a political victory for Prime Minister Modi and his Hindu Nationalist Party.
I'm Neville Lazarus and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi.
Companies like these are helping India in its trajectory to be a serious player in space exploration. Sky News, get the full story first.
So time to have another look at what's in today's papers. I'm joined by journalist and author Janelle Aldred once again. Hello, welcome back. Janelle, you've picked out a whole lot of new stories that we hadn't considered already to take us through. The Times, first of all, not their main story for now, but the one across the top, power plants with meters fitted backwards cost us £100 million a year. I mean, that's quite a stark headline.
That is, and the electricity users could be paying £200 million extra a year because hundreds of power installations have their meters fitted backwards. And so it means that basically there's a state-owned National Energy System Operator, NESO, and so basically the meters are telling the grid operator they're consuming power when they're actually generating power. And so the grid control room is responsible for making sure the power supply and demand is in balance, so there's no blackouts. But basically whistleblowers say they're actually flying blind because the data's really poor because these meters are on backwards. So a spokesperson says that actually the 100 million is not a direct-to-consumer pipeline, which I think we all understand it's not a direct flow. And Ofgem are actually working to implement a solution. But I do think it's really interesting. You know, we don't often hear about things like this. And he's saying an independent consultant called Andrew Larkins is saying that fixing the issue would cost 44 million. So either way, we're going to be paying a lot of money, but it would seem that it would be better to fix the problem than to keep paying an extra amount year on year, because they're not going backwards. And I think what they're saying is there's just not a lot of light on this subject. And I think this is places, I know journalists get a lot of stick, but it's stories like this that I think, you know, journalism is really important for highlighting that there is actually an issue here which otherwise would go kind of under the radar, and we would never know that we're paying extra on our bills because of meters being fitted backwards.
Well, yes, and as you say, a NISO spokesperson talking about, at least it's not a system security issue, which, as you say, is a good thing. But they also say that the figures cited shouldn't be presented as actual consumer costs.
So it's not 100 million on top of our bills, in maybe in the way the headline
states.
There
will be a cost.
But there will be a cost. And could you imagine all those meters on backwards? Someone needs to fix that, really.
Yeah, you'd think. OK, let's move on to the front page of The Guardian. They have their main story actually is about warnings about food shortages. But let's just acknowledge the column to the right of that. And this is the story of the crossing of around 60,000 migrants, it's thought, into the Spanish enclave of Ceuta, which has a land border with Morocco, doesn't it? And this has obviously attracted a lot of attention around Europe and in the UK.
Yeah, and around 67 people sadly lost their lives, you know, during that. But it's been interesting what the Moroccan government has been saying, that a lot of people are seizing on this, and obviously the viral pictures of everyone kind of streaming in. And they're saying that it's not really that simple and that it shouldn't be used for propaganda because there's an actual issue here. And it doesn't mean that we will have the same thing happening here in the UK, which we looked at another story on this where Shabana Mahmood was saying it's not going to happen here in that kind of a way.
Because it's a different kind of border.
Because it's a different kind of border. So it's a land border. So there is actually a crossing, a 12-mile water crossing. But what it seems like is that people were allowed to enter the crossing on land and then only swim for 5 minutes by the authorities, and were able to then actually go through the border. And then people from Spain were leaving mainland Spain because they wanted to get away from everyone streaming over. So it does sound like a terrible situation, and for some people quite deadly. But I don't think we're going to see it here in that same way as sometimes the pictures and the rhetoric might suggest.
Yet we have got an emergency meeting of European leaders, or certainly a European meeting tomorrow, and political parties here all talking about migration, so it's really put it on the agenda here as well. I'm going to leap ahead to a story that you were telling me about just before we came to you in The Guardian about ultra-processed food firms. What is The Guardian saying here?
Yeah, the World Health Organization Director General has accused global food companies of obstructing vital public health measures. So they're a lot of countries are trying to put warnings on ultra-processed food labels. You know, we've got an obesity problem in this country and many others, as we well know, well documented. And so basically what he's saying is that these food companies, although publicly they say we're all about, you know, healthier food, actually behind the scenes, an investigation by The Guardian has said there's been 235 lawsuits put in place by these companies targeting Mexico, Colombia, Brazil, the US and the UK over the space of 15 years. And even though 3/4 of these cases were lost by the food companies, again, you know, for not putting labels on and etc., and warning people of the dangers of ultra-processed foods. But what the WHO are saying is that even though they didn't win, they've tied up countries in expensive litigation, meaning that they're slowing down the public health measures that people are trying to take. So although they don't win, it costs us all a lot of money. And as we know, when someone sues our government, they don't sue the government. The government doesn't have money. The government has our money. It's taxpayer money.
You would expect that if they are losing at that kind of rate, it's going to be seen to not be worth continuing to use litigation.
How much money they're making to try and do it. So when we see the friendly fast food adverts, behind that on the other side, they're actually also suing our government so that we can keep eating food. And do you know what? It's people's choice. If they want to eat ultra-processed foods, people have the right to have it. But I think it's important to have the education that actually it's not good for you, and the fact that they're actually suing governments over that is actually quite disturbing.
Let's move on to an article inside The Eye, and they are so many articles about Andy Burnham, as you would imagine, the new Prime Minister, and obviously his policy that he has announced to date is being picked apart, but also the vibes he's giving off as well. What's the Eye saying?
Well, the Eye's saying they don't think he has as much riz as the kids think he has. So what they're saying is that he's being very everyday man and you know, doing all of these social media videos. I think there's always something to say. The only way to avoid criticism is to literally do nothing, because we all said that Keir Starmer was too stiff, too wooden, couldn't communicate very well, out of touch. So now we have someone who's now too in touch with himself and too blokey. You know, it is always hard to know politicians, and I think it is hard for them to strike that right balance of how real.
Well, I was going to say, but don't people have quite a good radar for authenticity? And it's a matter of, you know, if someone feels that a politician is being themselves, you know, even if it means being on social media all the time, if they think that it rings true, then it's going to be good for them.
And that, I genuinely do think that. You know, I train senior leaders in, you know, how to be, and it's never about not being themselves. Yeah,
that's so interesting.
But it's
I want
not.
To have names.
It's not about training them to be something different. It's about the right version for themselves, for the public. There is, of course, a version of Andy Burnham we'll never see, because that's private and that's for him. But
so, what do you make from your perspective of working with politicians to kind of let people see the authentic them? What do you make of how he's doing?
I think he's actually very good at it. I don't think it's quite tipped over the balance yet, but I do think there's a point where we'll be like, OK, we need to see less of you and more of your policies. We need to see more of the authority that you carry, the decisions that you're making and the reasons behind them, why you're making them. But I think in this kind of let's all get to know Andy Burnham phase, I think he's actually doing pretty well in terms of being very friendly. But there will come a tipping point where people say, OK, I think it was a bit like Keir Starmer's toolmaker father thing. OK, at first it was interesting. Oh, OK, that's the way you're coming from. But there comes a point of, OK, thank you very much. We know as much as we'd like to know about you now, and now we'd like to focus on what you are doing for us. And I think that's the balance of the tipping point that he will need to judge.
And I mean, it is an issue. We talked in the last hour about the challenges for Ofcom with technology developing. It's a challenge for politicians. Yeah. Oh, we've only got 10 seconds. You can't possibly answer that in the time. So I will have to say thank you and goodbye, Janelle. And say we've got top stories coming next.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
Who's funnier?
Being a Sky News journalist.
A special edition of The World with me, Yalda Hakim.
Pakistan has the right to respond.
You're like, what?
Historic day here today. Congratulations, this is a huge moment. But what happens now?
Hello and a very good morning. It's 9 o'clock. This is Mornings with me, Anna Jones. Here's what's happening today. Breaking news, Sky News understands the English FA is set to send a letter withdrawing support for Gianni Infantino's re-election, following on from the Welsh FA's decision. Donald Trump says negotiations to end the war with Iran will begin soon after calling off a wave of weekend strikes. But Iran reportedly deny the talks are taking place. The longest ballot paper in British political history. We preview the upcoming Clacton by-election following the resignation of Nigel Farage. Also today, we're going to discuss the meningitis B vaccine as tens of thousands of young people receive their first dose. And the dramatic smash and grab as thieves make off with a cash machine after tying it to their car. Hello, very good morning, and thanks for joining us. Our top story today, breaking news this morning. Sky News understands that the English FA is set to send a letter withdrawing support for Gianni Infantino's re-election. We also revealed that Wales became the first football association to officially withdraw support. This follows the loss of confidence in his leadership after that botched attempt to sell off a stake in the World Cup. From our sports correspondent, Rob Harris. We're going to get a reaction from Jackie in a moment, but let's bring in Rob first of all, because, Rob, you're the one that's broken this story this morning, so what can you tell us?
Yes, this is now a concerted effort to force Gianni Infantino out of power at FIFA. We understand that the English Football Association is set to tell Gianni Infantino in writing that they have withdrawn support for his re-election next year as FIFA president. This is an escalating crisis for him. It was very early this morning. We were live on Sky News revealing that Wales had officially submitted their letter withdrawing backing for Infantino's re-election all over this attempt to sell off stakes, which has imploded. This attempt to sell off those stakes in the World Cup to private investors, creating fury, particularly across European football. And there now is this momentum across the UEFA nations to put pressure on Infantino to leave office. The Football Association on Saturday said that they didn't have any confidence in him, and they called for a full and robust review of FIFA's leadership and governance to ensure that the global game is run transparently for the benefit of all 211 member nations and with the long-term stewardship of football at its heart. And now we're seeing some of that action take place. I've not heard from Infantino in the 2 days since putting that statement out. He's been quiet since he put a statement out exclusively in the early hours of Saturday morning to Sky News, revealing that he was abandoning this attempt to launch a $20 billion valued venture to hive off the money-making parts of FIFA into and sell $4.2 billion to private investors. And there is this sense, what will it take from European nations as they see it for Infantino to leave office? This is an attempt to put pressure on him to do so. They do have the mechanisms of forcing a vote of no confidence. It's next March in Morocco where Gianni Infantino is due to stand for re-election as things stand. Having first gained power in 2016, it would give him another 4-year term until 2031. And what we got the sense of, the fact that the FA had submitted their backing, is how much support Gianni Infantino had, particularly in recent months, despite mounting questions about some of the ways he was conducting himself at FIFA, some of those close links with Donald Trump, some of the business dealings, some of the decisions off the pitch, some of the issues with disciplinary decisions like the lifting of Folarin Balogun's red card suspension for the USA star at the World Cup, like Cristiano Ronaldo getting off his ban for the start of the World Cup without any explanation at all. So there already were questions about Gianni Infantino's leadership, but they've all been brought to a head by this controversy of the attempt to sell off stakes in the World Cup. And now we are seeing a draining of support for Gianni Infantino in Europe. But there are parts of the world still backing him. We hear a lot from particularly African nations, in the Middle East as well. Qatar have put out support for his leadership as well, praising him for listening to people and withdrawing these plans. But certainly for within Europe, there is now a determined effort to force Gianni Infantino out of power. And Sky News understands that the Football Association from Wembley is writing to FIFA to withdraw their previous backing for Gianni Infantino's re-election as he tries to seek the endorsement yet again of the 211 football associations to continue in power, but that is looking increasingly unlikely.
Rob, it's Jackie. I just want to know, what does this actually mean if you've got two nations who've withdrawn their support? He had around 200 letters of support, so he's still got loads of backing. I mean, what would it take if, I don't know, 90 people put in letters and say, we're withdrawing our vote? Would it actually mean anything until that vote happens in March?
It would be a huge crisis within world football if there was to be such a divide like that, with civil war, with a huge block of the world still backing Gianni Infantino and another power base completely against him. And often Infantino has pointed to perhaps Europe having too much power, even though he himself was formerly the General Secretary at UEFA and has tried to sort of divide the world in that sense of positioning himself as helping particularly nations in Africa, those who not qualified for World Cups, to help them develop and sort of positioning themselves against the European power. In fact, in a JP Morgan FIFA presentation I obtained last week, it talked about the undervaluing of the World Cup compared to, say, the Premier League, even though the Premier League is a year-round competition largely, and the World Cups are staged every 4 years. So that's where you see some of those issues mount. So it is an interesting question, what would happen if still he does have the resolute backing of some parts of the world. But the sense I've been getting, we saw this on Saturday when UEFA put out their joint statement. It was followed by individual FAs gradually throughout Saturday putting their own criticisms out in public to their own name. And that's the sense I'm getting now. There is an effort to sort of build momentum with separate statements, separate comments to show the dissatisfaction of European nations.
And Rob, it is relatively complicated and a slow process if these nations are going to force Infantino to step down. But is he likely to go of his own accord if he feels he's lost the faith of the countries that FIFA represents?
Well, some it might be surprising. There's been no element of contrition or apology in the last few days at all, sensing how the public mood is. And, you know, he has largely been insulated in quite a bubble, a Donald Trump bubble at times in the last year. So that sense of how much in touch with reality is something that's been brought in to question at times, which perhaps brings into doubt some of the decision-making. He's also lost his senior advisor, Carlos Cordero, who announced to Sky News on Friday that he'd quit in protest at this bad deal, as he put it, for football. So he has a diminishing number of people around him also to consult on these matters. But we haven't heard from him since that Saturday morning statement in the early hours. So unless he's sort of trying to strategically plan something, he's certainly allowing the void to be filled by the critics and all the concerns about his leadership. He's been absolutely eviscerated in public over his style of leadership and the sense of how it's about what personal financial benefit there is across all these schemes that he's been involved with as well. Well, in the past, he has denied wrongdoing. So it does lead to the fact, would there be a call for a vote of no confidence? It would take 20% of the world's 211 FAs. So it could be done, but it would also take some time. But the question is, does he try to dig in? As he's previously seen up previous controversies, we've reported so often various things over the years, you know, whether it was the attempt to launch a World Cup every 2 years that created so much anger. Then there was an attempt by UEFA nations to boycott the World Cup. This was the thing put on the table last week, that no European nations would participate in the World Cup as long as Infantino pursued these plans, and until he gave some guarantees that there would be changes in the way FIFA was being run. So that was the determined view then. And now it's sort of hardening up in terms of that attempt by European nations to be the ones leading the drive to see Infantino leave office, because it's very much of the sense from the highest parts of European football that for this time, enough is enough. I'm very much hearing that they do want to see Gianni Infantino out of FIFA.
Rob, really interesting. Thanks very much indeed for that. So, Jackie, Rob saying there that the English FA is set to send their letter withdrawing support for Gianni Infantino following Wales's lead. Rob was telling us about that in the middle of the night last night, that Wales, the first nation to do that. And so the big question is now, how many will follow suit, and will it mean that he's ousted?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it won't mean he's ousted in the here and now, even if, like I said, 90 nations say we are withdrawing our support. He needs 106 in the March election to be re-elected. He may still have 106 votes, but the amount of damage that's been done to the brand of FIFA, the image of FIFA with all of this, you have to say it's not likely he's going to hang on. The FIFA Council are the main council within FIFA, which has got 37 members that make the big decisions in FIFA. There are 8 vice presidents. For example, Alexander Seferin of UEFA is a vice president, but there are 8 of them. If 19 of this council want to call an extraordinary meeting to bring him down, to ask him to resign, to create a vote of no confidence, they can. But 19 that's the magic number. They have to call that meeting. And if that were to happen, that would be a much quicker process in terms of recommending that he goes. If you're relying on the member nations, the 211 member nations withdrawing their support, and so far you've got 2 handing in their letters, what needs to happen there is 20% of the 211 need to write a letter to call a meeting, an extraordinary Congress meeting, for a vote of no confidence, get rid of him, and that takes 3 months. So that's not a quick process. I chatted to FIFA last night for quite a while to try and understand the process, and it's just not instantaneous. It's not, we think you should go, you're gone. You also have to have someone to fill the void, who is the candidate, who could also...
Who everyone unites around.
Who everyone unites around and would get the numbers. There is one name that's been talked about, is Victor Montagliani, the Canadian from CONCACAF. He is a vice president on that FIFA council. He's very popular. He's growing in popularity. The question is, does he want that job? He might not necessarily want that job. And would he get the numbers? You would have to do a lot of canvassing to see where people's loyalty lies. And there will be a lot of countries in the world that will still be loyal to Gianni Infantino, in Africa, in South America. Qatar has come out and said that they still back him, which will rule out, a couple of members who you thought might be a candidate. They can't because their country backs him, so they can't. I honestly
see where it goes.
Don't know where this is going to go and how quickly it will go.
Yeah. You'll keep us up to date, though, I know. And actually, we're going to get the view of Henry Winter.
We're going to talk to Henry,
writer,
who has been challenging FIFA a bit as well, along with several journalists at the World Cup over lots of things like the drinks breaks and things like that. And he will, Gianni Infantino still has to answer questions about what happened at the World Cup, not least what has just happened regarding the potential selling off of FIFA assets.
Jackie, fascinating stuff. We'll talk about this again at about past, but for the moment, thanks very much indeed. To the Iran war now, and Donald Trump says negotiations with Iran will begin soon after calling off an intense wave of strikes he planned for the weekend. Travelling on Air Force One, the president said he decided to cancel the large-scale attack after hearing from Gulf leaders.
Well, now what we're doing is we're talking to them in the form of a negotiation. It begins tomorrow afternoon, and we'll see if it's true. I'd love to do that, save a lot of lives, save a lot of unnecessary power, to be honest with you. It would take many, many years to ever build it back. If it could, I don't think it would be even buildable back. So we had an attack that would be the biggest attack since World War II, and it would have been disastrous for them, and they didn't want us to do it. And frankly, Saudi Arabia didn't want it either. They thought that a deal is imminent.
And just to update you on this, according to the Reuters news agency, Iran's foreign ministry spokesperson has dismissed claims that the talks are happening. They've said there's no plan to receive a delegation or send an Iranian one for talks. So we'll keep a close eye on that. Now, here the Prime Minister insists that his government will be relentless in tackling small boat crossings. Andy Burnham made the pledge while meeting emergency workers in Dover. Our political correspondent Lucy McDade reports.
This image could come back to haunt Andy Burnham or hail him the leader who succeeded where others didn't. Beside him, a boat that carried 96 migrants across the Channel in May, among those on board men, women and young children. They're the scenes that have become all too familiar, ones that successive governments still haven't managed to stop.
We have to deal with the issue rather than play politics with the issue. Just deal with it head on, grip it, and then make the changes that will bring that reassurance to the public. It's about changing the whole approach, and slowly but surely we are putting in place those building blocks of a very different approach to this issue. It's working, but there's more to be done.
But as Andy Burnham says, these pictures don't actually tell the full story. Small boat crossings initially went up after Keir Starmer came to power, but the official data shows numbers have since fallen. At the start of this year, that dipped significantly and continued to gradually decline. But that doesn't mean the boats have stopped. And since Andy Burnham took over, in just 2 weeks, we've seen more than 2,000 people arrive on UK shores. The weather is, of course, a factor, but the government is pointing to policy. So, for example, a deal with France was renewed fairly recently at a cost of £662 million. What's it paying for? Well, more police officers on French beaches, more surveillance technology, so like drones along the coastline, to intercept criminal gangs. In Dover, these officers try and track down the people smugglers behind the channel crossings. They've more than doubled in number since the start of 2025. But while the government believes these measures are working, others say they're not going far enough.
Since this Prime Minister came to office, he's not even been in post 2 weeks. More than 2,000 people have arrived and several people have been found dead in the Channel. This is a huge problem. It requires a real sizable solution. The solution's there. The National Crime Agency have told us, the people at home know, people who come into this country must be detained and must be deported.
Scenes like this have heightened tensions in recent days. Around 60,000 migrants have crossed from Morocco to the Spanish territory of Ceuta in northern Africa. Unprecedented pictures, prompting critics to blame Spain for being too liberal on immigration. So while back home the new Prime Minister might be somewhat satisfied with government progress, he also knows this is the issue that has plagued his predecessors. Complacency could not only cost him his job, but Labour the next election. Lucy McDade, Sky News in Dover.
Well, you heard there from Lucy about the crisis in the Spanish enclave of Ceuta, where tens of thousands of migrants crossed from Morocco. Well, the European Union will hold emergency talks on the issue tomorrow after Italy reinstated border checks on arrivals from Spain. Well, it's also caused anger on the Spanish mainland. Around 1,500 protesters took to the streets of Madrid to demand the Spanish government take action. Around 60,000 people crossed into Ceuta, but most have now returned voluntarily, although at least 86 people died in the chaos. Well, here, Reform UK said that they would launch what they call the largest military operation in the English Channel since World War II to stop small boat arrivals from France. Well, earlier I asked the Energy Secretary, Miatta van Buller, about that idea.
Candidly, we're not going to take advice from Reform about how we get to grips with this, because the set of people they've got in charge in Reform were the set of people who were in the government at the time when we saw this crisis. We think we do have an approach that's working. We just have to be, we've got to be focused, we've got to be relentless. It's down by 50%. There is more that we need to do. We recognise that, but the approach is working.
Well, I'm joined now by the Shadow Home Secretary, Chris Philp, to get the Tories' take on all of this. Very good morning to you. Thanks so much for talking to us. I'll ask you about what you think of Reform's plans in a moment. But first of all, I noticed that you, the Tories, have pointed out that Ceuta is a warning for Britain. Why do you think it's a warning? Do you think a similar thing could happen here as happened there? Isn't it a very different situation?
Well, what happened in Ceuta shows you what can occur when there are pull factors that attract people into a country, into a territory, because the rules are weak. The rules in Spain clearly are very weak. The Prime Minister there, the Socialist Prime Minister, has recently given settlement to about 1 million illegal immigrants. And we see a similar thing here with our Labour government, where illegal immigrants get accommodated in hotels. 95% of those crossing the Channel on small boats get to stay. That is a phenomenally powerful pull factor. I was in northern France last week on Wednesday. On that day, that one day alone, 750 illegal immigrants crossed the English Channel because of those pull factors. I witnessed 100 of those personally. I was in the water waist deep, witnessing those illegal immigrants leaving. I saw the French gendarmes, who the Labour government are paying with £660 million of our money, stand by and do nothing while the illegal immigrants embarked. So I think it is a warning as to what happens when you have no border control. And we don't really have border control. The only thing stopping the crossings this year has been the rough weather, the wave height in the channel. And when it is fair, I asked a skipper, a fishing skipper, on the channel last week about it. He's had to cancel a lot of fishing trips this year because of the waves being quite high. And when you do get a day of calm weather, like last Wednesday, the illegal immigrants flood across. 750 on a single day, and over 2,000 since Andy Burnham became Prime Minister.
Yes, and yet Labour will point to their record over the last year and say that crossings are down by 43%. They say that the action that they're taking in cooperation with French authorities is working.
Well, I'm afraid to say, since the election, 75 or 77,000 illegal immigrants have crossed the Channel. That is a phenomenally large number. And this year, as I say, the wave height on the Channel has been higher, which has stopped some crossings. And when the Channel is calm, like last Wednesday, you find 750 people crossing on a single day.
The problem is, though, that under the Tories, they reached their highest level on record. So it's quite hard to hear you talking about numbers.
Well, of course, in the Conservatives' last full year, 2023, the numbers came down quite a lot. There was then the Rwanda plan to remove illegal immigrants to Rwanda, but Labour, after the election, cancelled that.
Well, you didn't
just
get it
before.
Off the ground, did you?
Well, the law had to change. A lot of legal work got done, and Labour then cancelled that just weeks before it started. We now have a comprehensive plan under new leadership, which involves leaving the ECHR, the European Convention on Human Rights, and that will enable us to deport all illegal immigrants within a week of arrival. No asylum claim, no human rights claim, no cushy hotel, no legal aid, no court hearing,
Hotels
nothing.
started under the Tories, of course.
Yeah, and of course they dropped a lot, but they need to end. They need to end.
Okay.
And we need to deport illegal immigrants within a week of arrival, because if we do that, that will act as a deterrent, and they then won't bother getting on a boat to leave France in the first place. That approach worked in Australia about 10 years ago, and it can work here too.
Reform has said today that the Tories and Labour have responded to this crisis using a free ferry service and free hotels. They are saying that tougher action is needed. They've talked about bringing in the Royal Navy and return every intercepted boat to France. Is that a good idea?
Well, I mean, that is a sort of shoot from the hip answer. They haven't really thought it through properly, as usual, because that plan depends on the French agreeing to receive back the migrants intercepted. That is the flaw in the plan. Look, I'm totally in favour of tougher action. This illegal immigration has to end. I was on the beaches last week. I saw it with my own eyes.
Doesn't your plan rely on countries cooperating with you when you say that you're going to send them back?
I think if you're sending someone back to their country of origin, the country they come from originally, that country does have an obligation to take back their own citizens, just as we would if the boot was on the other foot. Just last week, Germany successfully sent some men back to Afghanistan, for example. If there is any problem with a return to the country of origin, you then have a safe third country like Rwanda, but it could be somewhere else, who'll receive them instead. That is a credible, properly thought out plan that will work. It worked in Australia, it'll work here. I'm afraid Reform are just shooting from the hip in a bit of a panic. They haven't really thought it through properly.
A quick question about, you mentioned Afghanistan. Would you send women back to Afghanistan?
I would not send women back to Afghanistan, no, because I think it is genuinely dangerous. But there are lots of countries you can send people back to, including men back to Afghanistan. You do, and by the way, the majority of illegal immigrants crossing the Channel are young men. I was there last week on the beach, and they were mostly young men. There were very few women and children in sight at all. In fact, it's actually worse than that, because when I saw this dinghy embarking with about 100 illegal immigrants, I was in the water next to it, up to my waist in water, while the French gendarmes did nothing. And some women and children were being actually pushed off the boat by the male illegal immigrants because there wasn't much space on the boat. So really, this illegal immigration is about young men paying people smugglers. And I saw with my own eyes women and children getting pushed out of the way.
I just want to ask you a little bit about some of the plans that you're announcing today regarding the police. You say you want to give the Home Secretary the power to direct police forces to carry out specific investigative practices. Chief constables have traditionally guarded their independence very closely. So isn't this politicians telling police how to do their job?
Well, of course, individual decisions about whether to arrest X person or Y person are matters independently for the police. But matters of policy and priority, I think, should be subject to more democratic oversight, and the Home Secretary is the public's elected representative when it comes to police and crime. It's unacceptable, in my view, that 92% of reported crime doesn't get solved. We've all had examples, either personally or our friends, where you've reported a mobile phone stolen, and the Find My iPhone signal tells you where it is, and the police then don't do anything, or you've seen a stolen bike advertised on eBay and the police don't follow it up. I would like to mandate the police to always follow those kind of leads, that the iPhone signal, the mobile, the bike on eBay, or images of a suspect taken on CCTV, that should always be run through the facial recognition database. We can solve tens of thousands more crimes by doing these basic things. That's why I'd mandate them, because crime must have consequences, and the people who are scared should be the criminals, not the public.
If you're proposing that every force should routinely use facial recognition, what do you make of the fact that although the police would say that the technology is getting more accurate, there are real concerns from civil rights groups, for example, about privacy, but also the risk of mistakes? What safeguards would you put into place to ensure that innocent people aren't wrongly identified?
Well, obviously, you don't rely just on facial recognition to secure a conviction. You might use facial recognition, and there are two kinds, retrospective and live. You might use facial recognition to identify the suspect in the first instance. But then, of course, you've got to prove the case to a court in the normal way with hard, irrefutable evidence to the usual criminal standard, which is beyond reasonable doubt. So you use facial recognition to identify the suspect and then prove the case and secure a conviction in the normal way. It is, by the way, unbelievably accurate. So the Metropolitan Police have, I think, done about 3 million scans in the last year on the streets. That's a different kind of facial recognition. It's called live facial recognition. And of the 3 million scans, there were only 10 incorrect identifications.
There are concerns about
and they were let me come on to that. And they were rapidly identified. The police just said, "Can I see your ID?" And they were immediately released. The system a few years ago did have alleged racial bias. We're going back 7 or 8 years. They've now updated the system. It's been tested by the National Physical Laboratory 2 or 3 years ago. And the system the police now use, at the setting they use it, has no racial bias whatsoever. Live facial recognition, which is a bit different, was used in my town, Croydon, and in the last year, something like 200 wanted criminals have been caught, including a man wanted for kidnap, another man wanted for a double rape dating back 7 years. Those criminals, who the police hadn't been able to find using traditional methods, have now been caught and are being prosecuted in the usual way. It's working to keep the public safe, but I'd like to see the police use these techniques much more widely, because 92% of crimes being unsolved is just not acceptable.
OK, we could talk a lot more about this, but we don't have the time, unfortunately. Chris Fulk, thanks very much indeed for coming in. Thank you. Let's just bring you some of the day's other stories this morning and get set for more hot weather. The UK Health Security Agency has issued heat health alerts for 8 regions of England. Amber alerts will be in place for the East Midlands, the East of England, South East and London regions from 9 o'clock this morning. That's just gone, isn't it? For 24 hours. A further 4 areas will be under a yellow alert. It's emerged that the pilot of the plane which crashed in southern Peru had reported a mechanical fault during the flight. All 13 people on board the sightseeing flight over an archaeological site died in the crash. There were 11 European tourists and 2 crew. Investigators are still gathering evidence at the scene. And an investigation is underway after thieves stole a cash machine in southwest London. CCTV captured the gang hooking the machine to a car before driving off and ripping it out of the ground. No arrests have yet been made. Let's check on the weather now.
I hope we haven't forgotten anything.
Travel insurance, I tick that box.
Yeah, but remember what you forgot last year.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors Sky News Weather.
Well, this week will bring some much-needed rain, but not all drought-hit areas will see it, with the south hot and humid today. England and Wales will be largely dry this morning, with plenty of sunshine, but the odd shower will develop in the southwest. Elsewhere, it'll be cloudier with some rain, most prolonged over Scotland, and it'll turn out hot and humid across southern Britain, with a high of 34 degrees Celsius possible in the southeast. Most other places look cooler. And the afternoon will bring some showers or longer spells of rain.
All Clear Travel Insurance proudly sponsors Sky News Weather.
Jackie will be back in just a moment with the sport, including that latest news on Gianni Infantino's fight to hold on as FIFA president. More on that in a moment. So Jackie is back, and Jackie, we should reflect on the breaking news that we brought people at the top of the hour, that Sky News understands that the English FA is set to follow Wales, who were the first country to withdraw their support for Gianni Infantino of FIFA. So already a second country is following Wales' lead.
Yeah, and you'd expect like many more of those letters to start appearing because we know that UEFA, they have said all 55 of our members are going to call for a vote of no confidence, and CONCACAF seem very much joined in with them as well. Obviously, they stopped short of saying we're going to boycott the World Cup if you go ahead with your plans, and of course those plans aren't now going to go ahead. But let's see how many countries actually come out and make a statement. Let's talk to Henry Winter, actually, football journalist. Joins us now. Henry, you were at the World Cup. I think you had a couple of run-ins with FIFA, or discussions, shall we say. What does this mean? The Welsh FA have withdrawn their support from Gianni Infantino. The English FA are set to do the same, even if there are 90 letters withdrawing support from Infantino, who had a lot of support before this whole debacle. Will it do anything? Will he be forced to resign?
I mean, that's what UEFA are hoping. That's what many people in football are hoping, including one or two people within FIFA itself. I mean, these letters are obviously important, as you say, the English FA following the Welsh FA. So around 200 of the 211 member associations effectively, implicitly gave Infantino their support for the next March's election in Rabat for another 4-year term. And Infantino thought this was just going to be a straightforward procession. But obviously, the events of the last 2 weeks have just absolutely cast a cloud over that. What is interesting is that, OK, so the FA and the Welsh FA are saying we're not going to support you in March. But what is far more significant is what is actually going to happen now, because I think there are a lot of people who want him to resign. You see Infantino here in one of his rare public outings or press outings. They want him to go now because he's taken this great sport and the world game to the brink of civil war, and only by him standing down is the game going to be reunited again. And then, of course, it's just a question of who steps in. The General Secretary, Mateusz Grafstrom, who's sort of untainted by Infantino's scandal, he could come in step up as a sort of interim figure while the world sorts out who should be the next leader and the right leader, someone who listens, someone who's accountable, someone who doesn't just be seduced by the idea of rubbing shoulders with the rich and powerful.
I had a little chat with FIFA last night to try and understand the process, because it's quite complicated and there seems various ways that he could be removed, but none of them are particularly fast. Tell me what you know about the FIFA Council. So 37 members. I understand that if 19 were to step forward, and they could trigger a vote of no confidence, and then that could happen quite quickly. Do you think there are 19 on that council who would oppose Gianni Infantino?
I think there probably are. I think so many of them are disgusted by his behaviour and obviously in tune with the reaction around the world. You've been covering it. It's been all over social media, all over the newspapers, all over the world. Obviously, there's some bastions of support in Africa and one or two parts of Asia still for Infantino. And it'll be interesting to see whether he rushes through his plans to hand out some of the money, because FIFA do have substantial sums in reserve, which they could dish out without necessarily having to rush off to Wall Street and his billionaire mates, and also whether they rush through the idea of a 64-team World Cup for 2030, which would obviously bring in a lot of support and a lot of sympathy and maybe one or two votes from around the world of those countries who are desperate to actually get their hands on the World Cup. I mean, you see the FIFA Peace Prize, which he gave to Donald Trump, which almost triggered or certainly accelerated the concerns, some within the building and absolutely externally around the world. Has Infantino lost the plot? Has he become so seduced by power, by rubbing shoulders with the rich and famous? And actually, he needs to focus on what was actually a good World Cup and focus on what his job should be about, which is about his service to the game, not what the game can do for him. And
there are reports, aren't they, even before the whole plot to to sell off the World Cup, albeit a small part of it. Before that, there were questions that needed answering by Infantino. There were members of FIFA who thought, you should be answering questions about the overturning of the red card of Balogun. You should be answering questions about cutting the game up into quarters and introducing drinks breaks without really asking everyone if they're OK with it. There are questions. Yeah. There are questions to answer apart from this whole debacle.
Absolutely. You can rewind a year and Messi, his Inter Miami team, effectively being parachuted into the Club World Cup. What have they actually done to deserve to be there ahead of other teams? You could look at Cristiano Ronaldo's the lifting of his suspension, 2-game suspension for the group stage with Portugal, because obviously Infantino wants the big names to be on show, because that also brings in the big bucks from TV. So, and as you say, events at the World Cup, the White House's influence or interference, certainly the call for review into Balogun, as you say, that meddled with the disciplinary process, didn't help the Americans in the end, actually, probably backfired. As you say, the commercial invasion of the game with the mid-half breaks, the hydration breaks as they were called, commercial breaks as most sane people called them. So events like that, I mean, his fitness to govern. I mean, if you were a referee, Jackie, and you would look at him and thinking, shall I give him a second yellow card? You would just look all over the field, do a totting up process and say, off you go, mate.
If only it were that easy. What do you think he's thinking right now, Infantino? Do you think he's thinking, I'm going to dig in here because if this is delayed till the March vote, I probably could still get 106, which is all I need to remain in power? Or is he thinking something else?
I think probably the former. I think there's an arrogance and a naivety to him. I don't think he's necessarily taking the best of advice. So what the sort of in a way the good guys of football, and a lot of them headed by UEFA, need to do now is actually exactly what they're doing, is exerting the pressure. You've seen reports today of legal action being threatened against Infantino by UEFA. I mean, this really is now a civil war. I mean, it's almost Shakespearean when you've got parts of the same family warring against each other. And so the pressure will absolutely ratchet up on Infantino. They'll try to isolate him within FIFA. Then, FIFA is an organization of 960-odd, some of them very odd, employees. And a lot of them must be absolutely aghast about this. The other thing is, you're showing the pictures here of FIFA's base in Switzerland. Swiss law is quite labyrinthine and complicated to negotiate. So I just hope there are one or two people who he does listen to, maybe even Trump says, listen, mate, you're an embarrassment now, you've got to stand down.
And just ever so briefly, is there any outstanding candidate who would be better to replace him?
I think at the moment the logical step is to put, it's almost like a sort of football club where a manager leaves and you look at someone in the academy who can step up and sort of steady the ship. Mm-hmm. And Matthäus Grafström, the very sort of sane Swede, some of us spoke to him during the World Cup. He's a very balanced figure. He's not tainted by the Infantino scandal. Put him in, calm down, and whether it's Sheikh Salman or whether they're good individuals at CONCACAF can put themselves forward for the sort of the formal ceremony, as it were, in Rabat in March. But action needs taken now. I mean, Infantino needs really to go this week, and someone like Grafström just step in, steady the ship, and reunite this great game.
Oh, Henry, the optics are not great, are they? And March is a very long time away. Let's see what happens. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Very interesting. We'll have to just wait and see, won't we, how many more countries put forward letters, withdrawing support, and see if momentum builds. And interesting what Henry said, and I think a lot of people suspect that Infantino will dig in, and see if he's still doing the numbers. The maths works for him, and he hold on till March, and then hold on till March. Yeah, interesting. We'll keep you up to date on that. In the meantime, though, let's reflect on the Commonwealth Games, which came to an end last night. I know, and I think you sort of got the feeling that, there were a lot of people not so much engaged in the Commonwealth Games as they normally are. You had athletes, star athletes, for example, like Keely Hodgkinson, who has said, I'm not going to compete, I'm going to concentrate on the Europeans, which follow shortly afterwards. But those who did, I think, really had an amazing experience, and Glasgow did an incredible job
stepping in really at the last minute and putting on a Games which was meant to be held in Australia. They pulled out for finance reasons, and Glasgow have stepped in and done it for a fraction of the price. And
slim down Games.
Slim down Games, but nevertheless, it created some really good moments. Emma Finucane, asked her if she enjoyed her Commonwealth Games. I mean, she lived the dream. 4 gold medals in 4 days for the Welsh sprint cyclists. No sprint cyclist has ever done that. None of the big names that you know, Chris Hoy, none of them have ever done 4 golds at a Commonwealth Games. She is now officially the most successful female Welsh athlete at a Games. And so she got her final gold yesterday morning, and then in the evening she was carrying the Welsh flag at the closing ceremony.
Oh,
so that's the stuff that dreams are made of. And even the closing ceremony was a bit of a feat, because I think it was hosting the netball tournament earlier in the day, and then in the evening they just transformed it into a closing ceremony venue.
Shipped in lots of Scottish people with cone hats.
The athletes were all given felt cone hats to wear, which is
fantastic.
I actually just thought this was a nod to the World Cup, where the Scottish fans were so brilliant and were putting traffic cones on statues. It's been going on for quite a while, but kind of fun. Just made it a bit more fun. But there were good stories that came out of those Games. You had Archie Goodburn, the swimmer, who got to the final with a brain tumour.
Incredible.
You've got, Adam Peaty Ramsey, with his comeback story, which didn't really kind of work out and left him leaving the Games thinking, I've got a lot of thinking to do. Josh Kerr, winning the mile and literally going all around the outside, and he's so fast, he did it very comfortably anyway. And he will, leave his home Games thinking, I'm invincible.
Yeah.
Everyone
else will think that as well.
And everyone else will think it too. So for a lot of people, it worked out very well and was a good Games.
Golf?
Yes, Women's Open Golf finished last night. It was quite dramatic in the end, actually, because it was won by Shino Kawaki of Japan, who picked up the £1.1 million prize. But there was a playoff with Esther Henseleit. Now, Shino Kawaki was in the clubhouse thinking that she'd probably done enough to win. Esther Henseleit, the German golfer, had to sink a very big putt, which I think we can see. Here we go, 45 feet to take it to a playoff. That is a lot of pressure. Nailed it. So took it to a playoff. They went down the first hole, it was all square. Went down the second hole, the playoff, and Henseleit hit a marshal with her golf ball, and the ball pinged off into a bush. She then couldn't get her par, and that was the end of that. Which is a bit of a...
Such drama.
It's a bit of a shame, but anyway, well done, Shino Kawaki. 3 weeks till the start of the Premier League season.
You're excited already.
Exciting. Well, overnight, while most people were sleeping, Liverpool playing one of their warm-up matches in the States. They were playing Leeds. They were leading 2-0, looking very comfortable. Then they lost the match 4-2. So who saw that coming? Apart from Daniel Farke and Leeds, probably. Conceded 4 goals inside 25 minutes of the second half. So lots of things for Andoni Iraola to think about. But honestly, I'm not sure how much, store you can set by these pre-season matches. A lot of players are missing, a lot of World Cup stars are still on a break. You're trying out maybe different personnel.
Combinations, exactly.
And maybe not, the personnel you're going to even start the season with in 3 weeks' time. So I don't know how much you can read into that. But nevertheless...
Do you learn more from your losses than your victories, do you think?
I think you do. But sometimes in football you don't, because you're not playing the team that you're going to play. But it's a good opportunity to try out some young players, as we saw with Man United this week. Celtic play tonight. They will begin the defence of their Scottish Premiership title. It's against Dundee. It is live on Sky Sports. That one very much up and running. But Martin O'Neill, can he do it again? I suppose that's the big question.
Indeed. That's it for the sport.
There's been a lot.
See you soon. There is. I know, you're going to have a lie down. Must be exhausted.
I
will. More from me after the break, though. I'm going to be joined by the Medical Director for NHS London, Dr Chris Streether, to discuss the meningitis B vaccine. That's coming up next.
I witnessed the complete destruction of a place linked to my childhood memories.
This is insane.
I'm Yusra Al-Bagher, Sky's Africa correspondent based in Johannesburg, South Africa. I felt awe when we saw the mountain gorillas in Rwanda.
We call him the king of the jungle. This is the alpha silverback.
Sky News, get the full story first.
Go ahead, back white jacket.
Deborah Haynes from Sky News. He called you Daddy earlier.
No, he did it very affectionate. Daddy, you're my daddy. Thank you.
Leicester is on its knees.
They've ripped the soul out of my factory and there's nothing left.
It is eerily quiet.
It's constantly on the brink of capacity.
There's overcrowding. It's not a new thing.
It's rough.
There's nothing to hide. Why aren't international journalists allowed in?
Are you worried about escalation?
Of course I'm worried about escalation, which is why my focus is on de-escalation.
The region, I think, is on edge because they are anticipating a retaliation.
Iran retaliates for the US attacks.
Founding principle of the alliance, that an attack on one is an attack on all.
Could Putin attack another NATO country within 5 years?
I'm Adam Parsons, Sky's Middle East correspondent.
We've just entered Gaza. The vista out there is complete destruction. I'll always remember going into Gaza City during the war. All around us was destruction and the sounds of battle. I witnessed the scars of the October the 7th attacks, burnt out homes, bullet holes in walls and bloodstains on the floor.
People were murdered, people were kidnapped.
The Israelis insist that many of these prisoners are terrorists, but here the Palestinians consider them a blend of freedom fighters and political prisoners. These are the settlers in waiting, keen to start a new life.
The least we can do is just kick them out of our land.
Sky News, get the full story first.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
Who's funnier?
Being a Sky News journalist.
A special edition of The World with me, Yalda Hakim.
Pakistan had the right to respond.
You're like, what?
Historic day here today. Congratulations, this is a huge moment. But what happens now?
Now, almost 90,000 young people have received a meningitis B vaccine just 2 weeks after the NHS rolled out the campaign. It follows a series of outbreaks earlier this year that claimed the lives of 3 teenagers. Well, I'm joined now by the Medical Director for NHS London, Dr Chris Strether. A very good morning to you. Thanks so much for talking to us. So tell us a little bit more about this vaccination campaign and why it's up and running.
Yeah, thanks very much, and good morning. So we had the terrible tragedies last year where we had a number of deaths from meningitis, and in the days of modern vaccination, these are mostly avoidable. So we've had a real targeted campaign to increase uptake. And as you said in your introduction, 90,000 extra people have had their first dose of meningitis B vaccine this year. They need their second, in the last fortnight, they need their second dose more than 28 days after the first dose. And so we're opening up second doses on the 17th. And we've got 135,000 as well as the 90,000 that have been vaccinated. We've had 135,000 people make appointments. And hopefully this will make a real difference to avoiding this, terrible, life-changing often and sometimes life-ending disease.
And talk us through why this particular age group. I think it's year 13s, which is the upper sixth to some people, the kind of last year of school, to university starters. I think it's under 25-year-olds, isn't it? Why is it so important that that age group gets protection?
Yeah, so the group we're offering it to are people who were born after the 1st of September 2007 up until the 31st of July 2008. So it's the people, as you say, who've just come through year 13. when they go to university and live in relatively crowded circumstances often, and they inevitably I think increase the amount of social contact that they're involved
Nicely
in,
put.
and occasionally kissing does take place, and so sharing vapes, sharing drinks, living in close approximation, and kissing does increase the transmission rate. And we know that your chances of getting meningitis B go up by 7 times compared to people who don't go into that environment. So it's a really significant increase in risk when you go to university, and you can protect yourself substantially from that by having a straightforward vaccination.
And how long does this last for? Will this protect students for some time, or should this be an annual thing?
No, we hope it will give them a long period of protection and last them through the peak. Meningitis tends to peak in younger people, and we hope it will effectively give them lifetime protection, or protect them. The greatest protection is at the time when they're most vulnerable, and so that they won't need a repeat each year of university. So if we can capture people, if we can capture teenagers at the right time, then we hopefully protect them from the most severe risk at the most vulnerable time in their lives.
And remind us what that risk is. I mean, we talked about, sadly, students dying from an outbreak, but how serious an illness is this?
Yeah, so it's one of the the commonest causes of sepsis, which kills people. And in fact, the NHS has recently launched what we call a modern service framework. So it's a real concentration on eliminating harm from sepsis. But in the sepsis syndrome, people become drowsy, they can eventually lose consciousness, they can become confused, but it can lead to what we call multi-organ failure, where the body's vital organs start giving up, the kidneys and the heart and so forth, and that ends up in impairing the blood supply to the extremities. So amputations are a really common consequence of sepsis and of severe sepsis, and also people can get damage because it's meningitis, which is the lining of the brain. The lining of the brain can affect nerves as they come out of the skull. So deafness is an important complication of severe meningitis, and then a minority of people can lose their lives. So they're really non-trivial things.
Absolutely, deeply unpleasant. So what would your message be to young people who fall within that age range today?
Yeah, so contact the NHS National Booking Service if you're in the eligible age range, which is that group of people who were in year 13 last year and going to university, or also anybody under 25 that's going to a university or to a residential further education course. And so those people are all eligible for the vaccine. They can get their first dose as soon as possible, and then get the second dose after 28 days.
Okay. That's all really useful information and advice. Dr. Chris Strether, we really appreciate your time this morning. Thanks very much indeed. Do stay with us. We'll have lots more on our breaking news this morning, that we understand that the English FA is set to send a letter withdrawing support for Gianni Infantino. More shortly.